Midnight has a way of finding you. It doesn't matter where you are, a city apartment, a country road, or the quiet corner of a house you thought you knew. When the hour is late enough, and the world is gone still, there's a frequency only the sleepless can hear. You've tuned into it now, maybe by accident, maybe because it was waiting for you. This is no ordinary program. This is a voice carried on wires older than memory, echoing through rooms no one lives in anymore. And tonight, it has stories for you. 7 tales, 7 doors. Each one will open, if you listen long enough. But a warning, once you step through, the house, the sea, the shadows, they may follow you back. Settle in, breathe slow. The night has time. And so do we. The dog's lullaby. Structure. Midnight is the hour when phones are not supposed to ring. If they do, it means one of 2 things. Someone has died, or something is about to. Alex Carter knew this the instant the shrill vibration cut through his sleep. He had been drifting in that fragile place between dreams and waking, where the silence of the house feels heavier than sound itself, the kind of silence that presses against the ribs and makes you aware of your own breathing. Outside, rain tapped against the window in restless patterns, like fingers drumming on glass. The street beyond lay abandoned, just a strip of wet asphalt glinting under the jaundiced glow of a single street lamp. The phone rang again. Too loud, too sharp, slicing into the stillness. Alex sat up, rubbed the heel of his palm against his eyes, and reached for the receiver. His hand paused in midair, suspended. He didn't know why, but touching it felt wrong, like answering a call that hadn't really been meant for him. The clock on his nightstand read 12:47 a.m. He exhaled, forced himself to grasp the receiver, and lifted it to his ear. Dr. Carter. The silence that followed wasn't quite silence. It was breathing. Thin, uneven, like someone pressing the phone to their mouth but unsure if they should speak. Then, suddenly, the dam broke. Doctor, you remember me. Last year, my Doberman, Max. He cut his paw, you treated him. Please. Her voice trembled. You have to help me. Something's wrong. Her words spilled over one another. A frantic rush. But he remembered. The dog, Max. Broad-chested, powerful, amber-eyed. A protector by instinct. Distrustful of strangers but deeply loyal. The woman, her name slipped from him now, like ink fading on paper. But her face hovered faintly in his memory. Pale, watchful, eyes shadowed by exhaustion. Alex's voice steadied into his old professional cadence. What's happening? Is Max injured? A sharp breath. Not injured. Not exactly. He won't stop. He's been at it for over an hour, growling, staring at the wall like there's something there. And Doctor, her voice faltered, dropped to a whisper. I think they're island. Alex stood, the chill of the wooden floor biting through his socks, the phone pressed tight against his ear. In the background, carried faintly through the line, came a sound, a low, vibrating snarl, deep in the chest of the Doberman. Not the bark of irritation, not the playful rumble of a dog dreaming, but the ancient growl that belonged to a creature staring into the unknown. Describe it, Alex said softly. Tell me what you hear. The woman's voice quivered, scratching, inside the wall. Heavy, not like a mouse or rat. It's too deliberate, slow, like it wants me to hear it. A shiver rolled through Alex's shoulders. He found himself pacing into the hallway, the shadows of his own home stretching long and thin across the floor. All right, stay calm. Dogs have sharper senses than we do. It might be an animal that found its way in. Go closer. Hold the phone near the wall, let me listen. There was movement on her end, the creak of floorboards, the shuffle of bare feet on carpet. Then the dog's growl thundered louder, vibrating through the tiny speaker pressed to Alex's ear. Beneath it, faint but undeniable, came the scrape. Slow, heavy, a dragging sound, as though something with claws was raking the plaster from the inside out. Another scrape followed, longer, ending in a dull thump. The hair on Alex's forearms rose. He pressed his palm to the wall beside him in his own house, as though testing for a vibration that wasn't there. The woman gasped suddenly. Doctor, it's splitting. The paint. There's a crack. It wasn't there before. It's widening. Max barked savagely then, the kind of sound that made Alex's teeth clench. The receiver crackled with the force of it, nearly distorting the line. The woman cried out. Her voice panicked. "Max, stop. Stop it." The phone rattled. For a moment, Alex thought she had dropped it. Then he heard something that made his stomach clench. A faint, high-pitched sound. Not mechanical. Not the house settling. Not even animal. A child's cry. Alex froze, the receiver slick in his hand. He tried to convince himself it was interference, some distortion of the line. But as he listened, the cry sharpened, thin, piercing, fragile like an infant, wailing from inside a dream. The sound was muffled, buried deep, but it carried that unmistakable cadence. Inhale, sob, gasp, sob again. He swallowed. Hold the phone closer, he managed. The sound grew clearer. The wailing thinned into hiccuping sobs. Behind it, the scraping resumed, rhythmic now, keeping pace with the dog's furious barking. Alex pressed the receiver hard against his ear, and then he realized it. The cries weren't coming from the wall. They were coming from the phone itself. His hand trembled. He leaned against the cool plaster of his own hallway wall, needing something solid. "Ma'am," he said, his voice raw. "Stay with me. Where are you right now? Which room of the house?" No response. Only the whimpering cry, high and broken, looping in his ear, and beneath it her voice. But not the same as before. She was whispering. Words blurred into gibberish, stretched thin, as though someone else were trying to shape her voice into something it was never meant to be. "Ma'am?" Alex's throat was tight. "Do you hear me? Tell me where you are." The whispering thickened, doubled, layered over itself. Not one voice, but two, then three, muttering in overlapping tones. Too quiet to distinguish, but too human to ignore. Alex pressed the heel of his hand against his temple. He spoke louder. "Tell me where you are." The phone erupted with noise. Max's bark exploded into a roar. Wood splintered. Something toppled over. The woman's scream cracked through the line, raw and jagged, then cut off mid-breath. Silence followed. Not the hollow hum of an empty call, but silence with weight, as though something enormous had pressed its hand over the line. Alex stood in his living room now, though he didn't remember crossing from the hall. The rain outside lashed harder against the glass, blurring the world into streaks of liquid gray. The house clock ticked into 1:03 a.m., its hands moving with stubborn calm. He pressed the receiver back to his ear, though his body begged him not to. "Hello?" His voice cracked. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Only the empty hiss of the line responded. Then, so faint he almost mistook it for imagination, came a tune, a melody carried in half-breaths, no louder than a hum, rocking, swaying, almost tender, a lullaby, but sung off-key, as though the singer had never truly heard human music before. Alex didn't remember hanging up. One moment the receiver had been pressed to his ear, leaking that distorted lullaby. The next, it dangled from his hand, the coiled cord twisting like a noose. He stared at it as though it might move on its own. The house around him felt too still, the silence too perfect, like the pause in a heartbeat when the body isn't sure whether to keep living. He placed the phone back in its cradle, slow and deliberate. The plastic clicked shut. The sound echoed louder than it should have. His breath was uneven. He sat down on the edge of the couch, palms pressed to his knees, willing himself to rationalize. Maybe the line had crossed. Maybe he'd been half asleep, hallucinating. People heard things in static all the time, voices bleeding from other calls, from old recordings. The human brain could invent horrors out of white noise, and yet he couldn't shake the way the dog had sounded. That growl, primal and furious, wasn't something you mistook for static, nor was the scream cut off mid-breath, nor that broken lullaby. Alex stood suddenly, as though standing would quiet the dread gnawing in his stomach. He pulled on jeans, a jacket, his old boots, and found his keys. The house seemed to watch him as he left, the shadows at the edges of the room bending slightly, like they leaned in to see what he'd do. Outside, the rain had eased into a mist that blurred the outlines of everything. Street lamps buzzed faintly, halos of orange light blooming and bleeding into the fog. The neighborhood lay empty. Rows of houses shuddered in sleep. He slid into his car, the vinyl seat cold against his back, and turned the key. The engine coughed alive, a sound almost too loud for the hour. The wipers squeaked across the windshield, smearing water into gray streaks. The radio came on with the ignition sputtering static. then latching onto some late-night program. A voice droned low. A preacher or talk host, it was hard to tell which. The words blurred, but Alex caught fragments. Beware the walls. Voices in the dark. Not all cries belong to the living. He reached out and snapped it off. The silence was worse. The woman's house wasn't far. 15 minutes by car, down roads that bent through woods and old stone fences slick with moss. He drove slowly, headlights cutting narrow cones through the mist. Branches arched overhead, dripping water in slow, heavy drops. Every so often, the Doberman's bark replayed in his mind, sharp, furious, vibrating through the receiver as if it had been right beside him. The thought unsettled him more than the cry itself. Dogs didn't bark at shadows. They barked at presence. A few miles down the road, he passed a field. The fog clung to the ground in thick sheets, hiding everything from view. For just a moment, in the sweep of his headlights, he thought he saw movement shapes in the mist, long-limbed, bending low to the ground, scattering as the car approached. He blinked, heart hammering, and the fog rolled back into stillness. Nothing there, just mist. Still, he pressed harder on the gas. The neighborhood where she lived had always struck him as too quiet. Even in daylight, the houses were set far apart, crouching behind hedges and half-dead trees. At night, the street felt like a corridor carved into the dark. He turned onto a road. The first thing he noticed was the dog. Max stood in the yard, tethered to the porch rail by a leash, body rigid, head lowered, teeth bared. Even from the car, Alex could hear the growl deep, vibrating, steady as a motor. The leash was taut, the metal clips strained. The dog's eyes reflected the headlights in twin amber sparks. Alex parked, heart racing. He cracked the window and called softly, "Max?" The growl deepened, but beneath it he thought he heard something else. A faint tap, 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 inside the house. Slow, methodical, like fingernails on plaster. He stepped out, boots crunching on wet gravel, the night air heavy with the smell of damp earth and iron. Max lunged against the leash once, the bark erupting sharp enough to sting Alex's ears. The leash held. The dog's body shook with the force of it, saliva flicking into the rain. "Easy," Alex murmured, though the words were for himself as much as the animal. The house loomed behind the dog. Its windows were dark, the curtains drawn tight. But even from here he could see it. A faint discoloration spreading from the corner near the baseboard of the front room, a line that hadn't been there before. The woman's car was in the driveway. The lights inside were off, and the phone line still hummed in his mind, carrying a lullaby that hadn't belonged to her voice. He mounted the porch steps slowly, each board groaning beneath his weight. His reflection warped in the window glass pale, stretched, trembling at the edges as though the glass itself couldn't quite hold him steady. He knocked once, twice. No answer. The only sound was Max, growling behind him, and the faintest scuffle inside the walls. Alex pressed his ear to the door. Nothing. Then, so soft it might have been imagination, he heard her, a woman's voice, humming, a lullaby. But it faltered, the notes dragging, like a recording played back on broken equipment. The words were unintelligible, but the cadence was unmistakable. Cradle song, meant to soothe. Alex stepped back, hand tightening on the doorknob. It was cold, too cold, as though the metal had been kept in ice. He turned it. The door gave way. Inside, the air was thicker, heavier than outside, as though the rain had seeped through the walls but not out again. The living room was dim, only a faint glow from a lamp in the corner. The crack near the baseboard was larger now, stretching jaggedly across the wall like a wound that refused to close. The dog's growl deepened from outside, vibrating through the walls as though the house itself carried the sound. "Hello?" Alex called, his voice tentative. "It's Dr. Carter." Silence. Then footsteps above him. Slow, measured. He froze. The woman had said she was in the living room when she called, not upstairs. The footsteps stopped. Alex swallowed, throat dry. "Ma'am, are you there?" The lullaby returned, drifting faintly from the stairwell. The same broken tune, the same too-slow rhythm. This time, it wasn't just humming. The voice whispered words between the notes. Not English, not anything he could understand. The syllables bent in strange shapes, as if the mouth forming them had never spoken human language before. Alex backed toward the door. His instincts screamed at him to leave. But then, a cry, thin, piercing, a child's cry. Not upstairs, not behind the walls. From the crack itself, Alex's breath hitched. He crouched without meaning to, drawn closer. The crack pulsed faintly, plaster dust trembling at its edges. He could hear it clearly now. The muffled sob of a child, breath hitching, lips trembling against the unseen barrier. He reached out a hand, stopped. His fingers hovered inches from the wall. Behind him, Max barked once, sharp, as if warning him off. The leash scraped wood. The dog's body thudded against the porch boards, straining to get inside. The cry shifted, suddenly melted into laughter. A bubbling giggle, broken, too fast, like a tape winding too quickly. And then, without warning, it matched perfectly. The sound of the woman's voice, not calling for help, but whispering, the same fragmented lullaby. Alex stumbled back, his shoulder hitting the doorframe. He looked toward the stairs. The humming had stopped. The house listened, holding its breath. Then the footsteps resumed, slow, descending. One step, pause, another, closer. Alex's chest tightened. His pulse hammered in his ears. His body screamed to run, but his feet refused to move. The last sound he heard before the lamp flickered was the woman's voice, clear now, carrying through the stairwell. "Doctor, why did you come?" The question froze him in place. "Doctor, why did you come?" Her voice floated down the stairwell, too calm for what he'd just heard, too composed for a woman who had been screaming minutes before. It was the voice of someone standing in a room they shouldn't be in, or wearing a body that didn't quite belong to them. Alex's hands curled into fists. His instinct was to answer, to call out, to demand, but his throat refused. He stood rooted to the spot, the silence pressing down, waiting for him to believe in it. The stairwell groaned under weight. A shadow stretched across the wall, long and indistinct, moving one step at a time. His pulse thundered in his ears. The lamp flickered once, dimmed, then steadied into a weak glow that painted the living room walls a sickly yellow, and then silence again. No more footsteps. Only the sound of Max outside, clawing at the porch and barking like he'd ripped the house apart to get in. Alex forced himself to move. He took a breath that burned his chest and stepped toward the stairs. His boots creaked against the floor. "Ma'am?" His voice wavered. "Where are you?" The answer didn't come from above. It came from the wall. The crack hissed faintly, like plaster giving way, and with it came a whisper, not hers, not human. A low murmur, broken, like several voices crowding into the same mouth at once. The sound bled into the room and settled at the base of Alex's skull, a hum beneath thought itself. He stumbled back, heart hammering, and found himself near the door. His hand brushed the knob. For a moment he thought of leaving, just walking out, calling the police, letting someone else decide what was or wasn't real. But Max barked again, desperate, almost choking on his own rage. And Alex realized the woman wasn't answering anymore. If she was here, if she was alive, he was the only one left who could reach her. He pulled the door open and Max surged inside before Alex could think. The dog's body was a storm of muscle and fur, the leash dragging behind him. He didn't lunge at Alex. He barreled straight for the crack in the wall, barking so savagely the windows shook. "Max!" Alex's voice snapped with instinct, but the dog didn't stop. He clawed at the baseboard, teeth gnashing against the plaster as though he'd tear through with his bare jaw if he had to. His throat convulsed with the force of his growl. Saliva splattered onto the floorboards. Then suddenly he choked. The sound was sharp, wet, strangled. Max staggered back from the wall, hacking, throat convulsing violently. His bark broke into a coughing gag, body shuddering. "Easy," Alex whispered, though fear strangled his voice. He crouched beside the animal, instinct taking over, hands firm but careful. He pried the dog's jaws open, ignoring the snapping reflex of teeth desperate for air. What he saw inside made his stomach lurch. Something lodged deep in the throat. Not food, not bone. Pink, fleshy, trembling with each convulsion. A tongue, but not the dog's. It was too small, too human. Alex recoiled, his knees buckling. Max gagged again, eyes bulging, claws scrabbling against the floor. The human tongue twitched once inside the dog's throat, as though trying to form words that never came. For a moment, Alex was frozen, mind screaming at him that what he saw couldn't be real. But Max's convulsions tore through the paralysis. Training kicked in. He grabbed the dog's muzzle again, forcing it open, ignoring the sharp scrape of teeth against his fingers. He reached deep, his hand sliding past saliva and muscle, clutching the obstruction. The texture was slick, alive. It writhed faintly under his touch, resisting removal like something unwilling to leave. With a guttural sound, Alex yanked. It came free with a wet rip, and Max collapsed onto the floor, heaving, gulping air. Alex staggered back, holding the thing in his hand. His stomach lurched, bile stung his throat. It wasn't just a tongue, it was the beginning of a throat. The raw, meaty opening of a larynx, trailing into darkness as though he hadn't pulled out an object at all, but the start of a whole person, torn off mid-construction. The thing twitched once, a final spasm, and went limp in his palm. Max coughed beside him, chest heaving. His eyes flicked to Alex, then back to the crack in the wall. The growl returned, weaker now but relentless, a sound torn between rage and warning. Alex dropped the thing onto the floor. It landed with a wet slap, oozing a faint trickle of blood across the boards. His vision swam. He pressed a hand to the wall to steady himself, but the plaster felt warm under his palm. Warm, pulsing. The crack widened an inch, dust spilling out in a thin cloud. From within came a breath, a long, drawn inhale, as though something behind the wall had just discovered air for the first time. The lullaby returned, but this time, Alex realized, it wasn't humming. It was being sung, a woman's voice, clear now, spilling through the plaster. But the words were wrong, twisted versions of lullabies he half recognized, syllables bent until they carried too many vowels, too many teeth. Max whimpered, backing toward Alex, his hackles raised high. Then the voice shifted. It stopped singing and spoke. "Doctor," the same cadence as the woman on the phone, the same tremble, but the tone was stretched, distorted, like something trying to mimic her and failing by just enough to curdle the blood. "Doctor," it said again, sweeter now. "Why did you take it out?" Alex stumbled backward, dragging Max by the collar. The house felt smaller with every breath, the walls bowing inward, the shadows swelling. His pulse pounded in his throat, threatening to drown thought. He glanced toward the stairs. The shadow was gone. No footsteps, no figure, only the faint smell of damp plaster and something sharper beneath it. Copper, metallic, blood-like. Max barked again, snapping Alex's attention back. The dog's eyes locked on the crack. His body trembled with urgency, as though begging Alex to understand something he couldn't. And then Alex heard it too. Behind the wall, faint but distinct scratching. Not claws this time, fingernails, dragging downward, and beneath it, muffled sobs. A child, crying again. The sound rose, thin and desperate. Then another cry joined it, and another. Voices layering, high and broken, until the wall itself seemed full of children wailing. Alex clapped his hands over his ears, but the sound pressed through skin and bone. Max howled, body rigid, barking into the noise, and then sudden silence. The wall shuddered once, then split wider, a jagged fissure racing upward like lightning frozen in plaster. Dust filled the air, choking, stinging Alex's eyes. From within the crack, something shifted, something breathing. He staggered backward, dragging Max toward the door, coughing against the dust. His boot struck something soft. He looked down. The thing he'd pulled from Max's throat had split open. Inside, not flesh, not bone, but hair. Long strands of dark hair, matted and wet, coiling out across the floorboards like roots. The strands twitched once, curling toward the crack, drawn back to whatever had birthed them. Alex kicked it away, bile rising in his chest. The lullaby resumed, soft, almost soothing, wrapping around the room like smoke. But this time, he recognized the voice. It wasn't the woman's anymore. It was his mother's. The lullaby wrapped around him like smoke. Alex staggered backward until his shoulders pressed against the front door. His breath came fast, shallow, each inhale burning as though the air itself had turned hostile. The house smelled wrong now, plastered dust mixed with something damp, sour, like soil freshly unearthed after decades underground. Max growled at his side, teeth bared, his entire body trembling between fight and collapse. The dog's throat worked with rasps, still raw from choking, but his growl never broke. His amber eyes never left the crack. Alex wanted to run. He wanted to drag the dog out into the wet night, slam the door, call the police, and never set foot in this house again. But his legs wouldn't move. He was pinned, not by fear, but by recognition. The lullaby wasn't just sound. It was memory. His mother's voice, faint and imperfect, but close enough to steal the breath from his lungs. He remembered her humming it when he was 5, tucked into bed with a fever, her hand cool against his forehead. She had died 3 decades ago. No recording of her voice remained. Yet here it was, bleeding through plaster. The crack pulsed once, as though it had drawn breath with him. "Stop it." Alex's voice was hoarse, but he spoke to the wall anyway. "That's not her." The lullaby faltered, and then the wall answered. "Doctor," the woman's voice now. Not from upstairs, not from the stairwell, from inside the wall itself. "Doctor, help me." Max barked, savage, throwing himself against the wall, claws ripping plaster and sprays of dust. His leash dragged, collar straining, his body desperate to tear into the sound. "Please," the voice whimpered, breaking into sobs. "It hurts. They're inside me. Help me." Alex's chest constricted. He had heard the real scream over the phone, heard it cut off. But what if? He crouched, eyes straining against the fissure. It was wider now, spreading jaggedly upward, exposing slivers of black void between the studs. For a moment, just a moment, he swore he saw skin inside, pale, shifting, pressed tight against the gap as though a face were straining against the wall, trying to push through. Fingertips slid out, raw and red, clawing weakly at the opening. Alex lurched forward before he could stop himself. He reached for the hand. The air pouring from the crack was hot, humid, as though he'd leaned close to the open mouth of something alive. His fingers brushed the tips of hers. The skin was wrong, too soft, too slick, like it had never belonged to bone. And then the hand collapsed in his palm, melting, dripping like wax. It slithered back into the dark with a wet suck. Max barked again, frenzied, pawing at the widening gap. The voice returned, stronger now, not pleading, commanding. "Bring him in." Alex's breath caught. "Bring him in." The wall whispered again, louder this time, layered with tones that weren't hers. Dozens of voices pressed into one, rising and falling together. "Bring the dog inside." The air shifted, the house exhaled, boards creaking like ribs under strain. The lamp flickered violently, shadows stretching long and warped across the ceiling. The stairs groaned, though no one descended them. Alex grabbed Max's collar, dragging him back from the wall. The dog resisted, teeth snapping, body quaking with a desperate instinct to fight. "Not tonight," Alex muttered, his voice breaking. "Not tonight, Max." He stumbled backward toward the door, pulling the dog with him. His hand clamped the doorknob. He twisted. It didn't move. Cold. Sealed. He twisted harder, metal biting his palm, but the knob refused to turn. He slammed his shoulder against the door. Solid. Immovable. Behind him, the wall cracked louder, plaster breaking in chunks. The lullaby rose again, this time louder, overlapping voices pouring through the fissure in a choir of broken sweetness. Children giggled between the notes. The sound of weeping threaded beneath it. The woman's voice screamed once short, raw before dissolving back into the harmony. The house was singing. Alex stumbled to the center of the room, dragging Max, both of them surrounded now. The ceiling groaned, bulging downward as though something enormous shifted above. The floor swelled beneath their boots, the boards bowing upward, flexing like cartilage instead of wood. He glanced toward the stairs. A figure stood at the top now. The woman, or something that wore her shape. Her outline was too thin, too long, as though stretched on a rack. Her arms dangled past her knees. Her head tilted sideways, an unnatural angle, hair spilling across her face. She swayed with the lullaby, her body rocking gently, as though cradled by a rhythm only she could hear. "Doctor," she sang softly, the lullaby shaping itself into words. "You shouldn't have come." Max lunged at the stairs, barking so savagely his throat tore. Blood speckled his saliva. His body strained against Alex's grip, desperate to attack. The woman's head jerked sharply, hair snapping aside, revealing her face. or what was left of it. Her mouth was gone. The lower half of her face was smooth skin, stretched taut, where lips should have been. The skin rippled, as though something inside pressed against it, trying to push through. When she spoke again, the words didn't come from her head. They came from the wall. You took it out. The fissure split wider with a wet crack, plaster exploding outward. The lullaby roared now, a cacophony of voices pouring from the opening, layered too thick to separate. Beneath it all came a sound that chilled Alex more than anything, a sucking inhale, like the first breath of a newborn. Max tore free from Alex's grip and threw himself at the wall. His body hit the plaster hard, claws raking, teeth snapping. He bit deep into the edge of the crack, tearing chunks free. His body shook violently, every muscle straining. Max! Alex lunged after him, but the dog's body jerked backward, yanked by something unseen inside the wall. Alex caught his hind legs just as the dog's chest began to vanish into the fissure. He pulled with everything he had, boots sliding across the warped floor. The air roared around him with voices, with lullabies, with the sound of children crying and laughing and whispering his name. The wall pulsed. The fissure widened. Max screamed. Not a bark, not a growl, a scream, and then something gave. The wall spat him back, flinging both dog and doctor across the floor. They hit hard, sliding into the far corner. Max whimpered, chest heaving, his body convulsing. Alex scrambled up, eyes fixed on the dog. His throat convulsed again. He gagged, cuffed, and from his mouth, another voice, a child's, high, broken, sobbing through his jaws. Alex pressed a hand to Max's throat, horror rooting him in place. The dog's chest convulsed. The sob became words. Help me. Alex stumbled back, bile rising. He looked toward the stairs. The woman was gone. Only her shadow remained, cast against the wall, still swaying to the lullaby. And the fissure gaped wider now, dark and wet, the voices pouring out like air from a collapsing lung. The house wasn't just haunted, it was hungry, and it had only just started to feed. The voices didn't stop. They spilled from the walls in torrents, a tide of lullabies layered with weeping, laughter, and something deeper, an undercurrent of guttural moans that shook the boards beneath Alex's boots. The fissure yawned wider, plaster raining down in chunks, exposing wet blackness beneath, like the inside of a throat. Alex clutched Max by the collar, but the dog's body jerked violently, caught between fury and collapse. Each convulsion brought another stolen voice spilling from his mouth, a child sobbing, a woman whispering, a man begging in hoarse tones. Max's eyes rolled white, foam flecking his lips. "Stay with me," Alex pleaded, his voice shredded. "Don't let it take you," the house answered with a laugh. Not one voice, but hundreds, erupting from the fissure, echoing through the stairs, the ceiling, the floor, a chorus of mirthless joy, so loud it made the lamp explode in a shower of sparks. Darkness dropped like a curtain. Only the crack glowed now. Not light, something thicker, duller, a phosphorescent shimmer, like moonlight through water, spilling from the jagged wound in the wall. And in that glow, Alex saw them, faces, dozens, pressed against the inside of the fissure, mouths open in silent screams, eyes rolling white. Children, adults, some half-formed skin rippling as if unfinished. They shifted against one another like fish in a net, their features blending, dissolving, reforming. One face pushed forward more clearly than the rest. The woman, her lips had returned, but they were too wide, stretched ear to ear. She smiled at him, and when she spoke, all the faces moved with her, mouths opening in perfect unison. "You brought him back to us." Max howled, his voice splitting into 3 registers at once. His body shook so violently Alex thought his spine would snap. Then, with a sickening wrench, Max broke free of Alex's grip and staggered toward the fissure. His paws slipped in plaster dust, his body trembling, but his head lifted proudly, defiantly, teeth bared. "Max, no!" Alex lunged, but the dog hurled himself at the wall, straight into the darkness. The fissure swallowed him whole. For a second, silence. Then the voices erupted again, dozens more added to the choir. Among them, clear as a bell, Alex heard Max's bark. But it wasn't a bark anymore. It was a lullaby. Alex fell to his knees, hands gripping his hair, his chest tightening as though the house itself pressed down on him. His thoughts flickered wildly. Escape, police, fire, anything but his body wouldn't obey. His ears rang with the impossible choir. His vision blurred in the pulsing glow of the fissure. And then, from within that darkness, something reached out. A hand. Small, childlike, fingers slick with plaster dust and blood. It reached toward him, trembling. "Help me," it whispered. Alex's heart tore in his chest. He crawled forward, against every instinct, against the scream of survival in his blood. He reached for the hand. His fingers closed around it. Warm, fragile, real. For one suspended moment, hope flared. Then the skin split open beneath his grip. The hand peeled back like wet paper, revealing nothing inside but teeth. They clamped down on his palm. Alex screamed, yanking backward, but the fissure opened wider, and dozens of hands surged out, grasping, clawing, pulling. They caught his arms, his shoulders, his throat. Their touch was hot, too hot, burning through his jacket, his skin. The choir roared. "Doctor," they sang together. Stay with us." Alex kicked, thrashed, but the hands dragged him closer. His fingernails scraped the floorboards, leaving streaks in the dust. His body inched toward the crack, the glow enveloping him. The woman's face pushed forward again, grinning impossibly wide. Her voice rose above the rest, smooth now, commanding. "Sing, doctor. Sing for them." He shook his head violently, but his throat betrayed him. A hum slipped from his lips, weak at first, trembling, then stronger. The lullaby. His mother's lullaby, spilling from his mouth without consent. Each note bent his ribs tighter, pressed his lungs until the only thing left inside was song. The faces grinned, swaying together, drinking his voice. And then silence. The hands let go. Alex collapsed to the floor, gasping, his palm torn, blood dripping into the dust. The fissure sealed slightly, narrowing, as though sated. The glow dimmed to a faint shimmer. The house exhaled. He staggered to his feet, chest heaving, vision spinning. The living room was nearly dark again, save for the thin sliver of crack and the faint hiss of plaster settling. The voices had quieted to whispers, humming faintly, like children tucked into bed. Max was gone. So was the woman. Only the silence of the house remained. Alex stumbled to the door. The knob turned easily this time. He flung it open, stumbling into the night air. Rain lashed against his face, cold and cleansing. He ran down the steps, across the yard, until his legs gave out and he collapsed in the mud, gasping. Behind him, the house stood silent, windows dark, as though nothing had ever happened. He crawled to his car, flung himself inside, and slammed the lock. His hands shook as he turned the key. The engine roared. He drove without direction, headlights carving through the fog, until the house vanished behind him. But the song didn't. Even with the radio off, even with the rain drumming against the windshield, he could hear it, faint, beneath his breath. He was still humming. Epilogue. The police found nothing. No woman, no dog. The house was empty, unremarkable, save for a single crack in the living room wall. Too small to matter, they said. Just the settling of an old foundation. But Alex knows better. Every night since, as he drifts towards sleep, the lullaby returns. Sometimes it's his mother's voice. Sometimes it's the woman's. Sometimes, worse, it's Max's bark, stretched into melody. He never answers the phone after midnight anymore. But sometimes when the house grows too quiet, when the shadows lean just a little too far into the room, he swears he hears it ringing anyway. The missing room. Some places feel older than the stones they're built on. You can walk down a street and swear the cobblestones remember every step ever taken, every secret conversation whispered against the rain, every scream that never reached the air. Clara and Leo thought they were walking into a fairy tale, but fairy tales have teeth. The rain had been falling all evening, a steady silver curtain that blurred the edges of the old city. Street lamps glowed weakly through the mist, each one haloed like a tired Sunday. Clara held Leo's arm, her umbrella tilted awkwardly as the two of them wandered through narrow lanes, their laughter muffled in the wet night. It was their honeymoon. They had chosen the city for its age, its promise of romance tangled with history. Winding alleys, Stone facades with wrought iron balconies, churches that rang their bells on no schedule anyone could explain. The air smelled faintly of river water and smoke. They had eaten too much at dinner. They had drunk cheap wine in a candlelit tavern. Now, with the storm keeping most tourists indoors, the streets felt like they belonged to them alone, until they saw the shop. It appeared at the corner of an alley that neither of them remembered passing before, a narrow storefront, wedged between shuttered cafes and antique dealers. Its window glowed faintly, yellow light spilling onto the slick stones. Inside, mannequins stood in crooked rows, draped in dresses decades out of style, jackets whose fabrics shimmered with dust. Clara squeezed Leo's hand. "Look at that one," she said, pointing at a mannequin in the window. The dress on it was pale green, faded at the seams, but strangely elegant, the kind of garment that begged to be tried on. "Just one quick stop, please?" Leo smiled. Her enthusiasm was part of what he loved most about her. Even in the rain, even with her hair sticking damply to her cheeks, her eyes sparkled with mischief. "All right, but quick, before we drown out here." The bell above the door jangled as they stepped inside. The air was warmer, but heavy, as though the shop hadn't been opened in years. The scent of mothballs and something sweeter like old perfume spilled and never cleaned lingered. Shadows stretched across racks of clothes. Every hanger seemed to carry something forgotten. A velvet coat with torn cuffs, a silk dress fraying at the hem, shoes whose soles bore the outline of long-dead owners. A woman stood behind the counter. She was older, her gray hair pinned tightly, her blouse buttoned high at the throat. She looked up from a ledger when they entered, her expression neutral. "Good evening," she said softly. Her voice barely rose above the rain pattering against the windows. Clara smiled politely, then drifted toward the racks, her fingers trailing across the fabrics. Leo followed, but slower, his eyes catching on the mannequins. Something about their faces unsettled him. They were featureless, smooth ovals where eyes and mouths should have been, but faint indentations pressed into the plaster as though features had once existed and been carefully erased. He looked away. Clara's excitement grew as she flipped through the garments. "Leo, look, isn't this beautiful?" She held up a pale green dress, remarkably like the one from the window. The fabric shimmered faintly under the dim light. "It's old," Leo said, forcing a smile. "That's the point." She pressed the dress against her frame, turning toward the mirror near the fitting rooms. "I just want to see how it looks." "1 minute." She disappeared through the narrow door marked fitting rooms. The curtain swished closed behind her. Leo leaned against a rack, listening to the rain. A clock ticked somewhere behind the counter. The shopkeeper's pen scratched faintly against her ledger. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 5. "Clara?" Leo called softly. No answer. He walked to the fitting rooms. The curtain swayed slightly as if touched by a breeze, though the air was still. He tapped the frame. "Clara? Everything okay?" Silence. He cleared his throat, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peek in. The room was empty. The dress hung neatly on the hook. The mirror reflected only his own uneasy face. Leo frowned, stepping inside. It was a small cubicle, no more than a chair and a mirror. Walls lined with faded wallpaper. No other exit. No trapdoor. He crouched, checking beneath the chair. Nothing. His chest tightened. "Clara?" He called louder this time, voice echoing strangely in the confined space. He pulled the curtain wide open and stepped back. The shop was quiet. Too quiet. The shopkeeper's pen had stopped. She was watching him now, her hands folded on the counter, her eyes fixed. "My wife," Leo said, trying to keep his voice calm. "She came in here. You saw her." The woman tilted her head. "No one has entered the fitting room tonight," she said softly. Leo's stomach turned cold. "That's not true. She was right here. I watched her." The woman's gaze didn't waver. "You came in alone, sir." Leo felt the floor tilt beneath him. His breath came sharp, fast. He turned back to the fitting room, stepping inside again. Searching desperately, he ran his hands along the walls, the mirror, the floorboards. Then his fingers brushed something strange. In the corner, near the baseboard, a thin line cut through the wallpaper, barely visible but enough. A crack. He leaned close, pressed his eye against it, and what he saw stole the breath from his lungs. Beyond the crack, another room stretched in impossible dimensions. larger than the shop itself could allow. Its ceiling was lost in shadow, its walls hung with ropes, and from those ropes, bodies dangled. Men, women, their limbs bound, their heads tilted downward, dozens of them suspended in silence. Their chests rose faintly with shallow breath. Their lips moved in unison, whispering words Leo couldn't hear, prayers or curses mouthed through cracked lips. At the center of them all, lit by a pale glow, lay Clara. Her eyes were closed. Her skin was waxen, too still, too pale, as though she slept in a dream she would never wake from. Leo staggered back from the crack, his heart pounding so loudly it drowned the sound of the rain. The shopkeeper was still watching him, her face expressionless. The clock ticked. The curtain swayed again. Leo stumbled backward from the fitting room, his chest heaving, every nerve alight with the impossible sight he had just glimpsed through the crack. The shop was silent, too silent. The old woman behind the counter hadn't moved. Her hands were still folded neatly, her chin tilted ever so slightly, her eyes locked on him. Her gaze felt less like a stranger's curiosity and more like a predator's patience, a cat watching something already trapped in its paws. Leo swallowed, his mouth dry. "Where is she?" His voice came out rough, torn. The woman's expression didn't flicker. "Sir, you entered alone." His stomach dropped. No, don't do this." He gestured wildly at the racks of clothing, at the empty fitting room. "My wife came in with me. You saw her. She tried on the dress. She walked right past you." Her eyes lowered, briefly, as if in pity or dismissal. Then she returned to her ledger, pen scratching again as though nothing had been said. Leo's heart slammed against his ribs. He stormed back into the fitting room, yanking the curtain closed behind him. The little cubicle was suffocating now. He ran his hands over the wallpaper seam where the crack had been. His fingers found it easily no longer faint, but widening, splitting the paper like a wound in skin. The light beyond flickered faintly, bluish, pulsing in rhythm with his breath. He pressed his eye against it again. The room beyond hadn't changed. The bodies still dangled, suspended, lips whispering soundlessly. Their words brushed the inside of his skull, though, like a breath against the ear. Too soft to hear clearly, yet too loud to ignore. "Come closer." Leo jerked back, pulse roaring in his ears. He staggered out of the fitting room again, the bell at the shop door jangling faintly, though no one had entered or left. "Clara," he shouted. His voice cracked. "Clara, answer me." Only the rain against the windows replied. The woman at the counter hadn't looked up. Leo's rage flared. He stormed toward her, slamming his hands down against the worn wood. "Tell me what's happening." His voice echoed strangely in the small shop, as though it had been absorbed and repeated a fraction of a second too late. The woman lifted her head slowly, her eyes, pale and gray as ash, fixed on him. "Some doors," she said softly, "are not meant to be opened." Leo's hands trembled on the counter. "She's my wife. She's in there. If you know something, you're going to tell me." The old woman smiled faintly. Not warm, not cruel, resigned. "Then you've already lost her." The words hit him like a blow. He shoved away from the counter, breathing hard, his vision swimming. The shop seemed narrower now, the aisles of mannequins pressing in, their featureless faces tilted slightly, as though listening. He turned back toward the fitting room. The curtain rippled, though no air stirred. The crack widened audibly now, plaster creaking, a faint trickle of dust spilling down the wall. Leo stepped inside again, each footfall hesitant, his entire body screaming at him to leave. The smell hit him first damp, metallic, like rusting iron mixed with old sweat. He gagged, covering his mouth. The mirror wavered faintly, as though water ran across its surface. His reflection distorted, elongating, his eyes blackened hollows. He blinked, and the image steadied. Then came the whisper, not from the room beyond, from the mirror itself. "Leo," Clara's voice. His heart stopped. He pressed forward, palm flat on the cold glass. "Clara? Clara, it's me." Her voice came again, faint but unmistakable, threaded with desperation. "It's cold here. Please, don't leave me." Leo's knees buckled. "Where are you?" The whisper echoed. "Behind." He turned sharply. The wall seam had split open further, a jagged mouth in the plaster, wide enough now to glimpse more than shadows. The bodies swayed faintly, Their lips moved faster now, whispers sharpening into rhythm, a prayer or a chant. He strained to listen. Stay, stay, stay. At the center of them, Clara's body shifted. Her head lolled slightly to one side, lips parting in shallow breath. Her eyes fluttered but did not open. Leo's heart shattered. Clara. The whispering rose into a hiss, all voices joining, a wave of insistence that pressed against his skull. Stay. He staggered backward out of the fitting room, clutching his head. The shop floor tilted beneath him, racks stretching taller, aisles lengthening like corridors. He stumbled past the mannequins, their plaster faces turned toward him now, indentations deepening, mouths pressing against smooth surface as though something inside was trying to escape. The woman at the counter stood now. Her eyes glimmered faintly in the dim light. You shouldn't have looked, she said. Her voice carried no malice, only inevitability. It's always worse when you look. Leo shook his head violently. I'm not leaving without her. Her lips thinned. She did not move to stop him. She only said, then it will take you too. He returned to the fitting room one last time, his breath ragged. The cracks split wider with each heartbeat, plaster crumbling, the wallpaper curling away. The air poured through, heavy with the scent of mildew and something coppery beneath. He pressed both hands against the wall, leaning close, straining to see. Clara stirred again. Her eyes opened halfway, glazed and distant. Her lips moved. At first he thought she was praying with the others. But then he realized she was mouthing his name. Leo. The fissure groaned, widening further. The chant swelled. Stay, stay, stay. A gust of cold air blasted against his face, smelling of earth and graves. His feet slid forward, as though pulled by unseen hands. The wall shuddered once, then buckled inward like rotten wood, and Leo fell through. The wall gave way like wet paper. Leo's weight pitched forward, his arms flailing, the fitting room vanishing behind him in a blink. Cold air swallowed him whole. For a heartbeat, he was suspended, his body tumbling through a space too vast to have fit inside the tiny shop. Then the ground rose up hard beneath him. He landed on his side, the impact jarring, knocking the wind from his lungs. The air here was different, heavy, stagnant. It clung to his skin like damp cloth. His breath echoed faintly, as though the room swallowed and repeated it a second later. Leo rolled onto his back. Above him stretched a ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. Thick ropes dangled down, dozens of them, each holding the weight of a human body. They swayed slightly, though no breeze stirred the air. He pushed himself upright, trembling. That was when he heard them. Whispers, a low murmur, hundreds of voices, overlapping in broken cadence. His ears strained, catching fragments. Stay. Pray. Stay. The words weren't sung aloud so much as breathed into his head, crawling down the tunnels of his ears like insects. The light here was strange. It didn't come from torches or lamps. It seemed to seep from the walls themselves, a gray-green glow that shifted and pulsed, like bioluminescence under deep water. It painted the suspended figures in sickly hues, their skin waxen, their features barely discernible. Leo's stomach lurched. Men, women, all hanging motionless, heads bowed, lips still moving. And there, in the center, Clara. Her name tore out of him. She lay on the ground, surrounded by the dangling prisoners like an offering placed at the center of an altar. Her dress was splayed across the floor, her hair fanned out, her skin pale as marble. Her chest rose and fell shallowly, each breath a fragile question. Leo staggered toward her, weaving between swaying bodies. His footsteps echoed strangely, each one followed by a faint second step, as though someone walked just behind him. He risked a glance over his shoulder. Nothing. Yet the whispering grew louder. He reached Clara's side and dropped to his knees. Her eyelids fluttered, but her gaze remained sealed within a dream. Clara, it's me. Wake up. His hands cupped her face. Cold. Too cold. And then he felt it. The air above her was moving. Not like wind, not like breath. More like suction, a slow, steady pull, as though something invisible hovered over her body, drawing from her chest with every rise and fall. Leo's skin prickled. He lifted his eyes. There was nothing there. And yet there was. The light bent faintly above her, the way heat warps the air above asphalt. A ripple in the shape of a figure leaning down, its head inches above Clara's lips. Every instinct screamed at him. His chest constricted as though the pull worked on him too, dragging not his body but something deeper. Her lips parted. A faint wisp of vapor escaped, shimmering like breath on a winter morning. The ripple above her swallowed it whole. No, Leo's voice cracked. Get away from her. He lunged upward, swinging blindly with both arms. His fists struck nothing, yet the air burned cold where he passed through, as though he'd punched smoke that remembered being solid. The ripple drew back slightly, a faint hiss flooding his ears. The hanging bodies around him swayed harder, their whispers rising into a chant. Stay, stay, stay. Clara's body convulsed, her breath hitching. Another wisp tore free from her throat, thin and glowing, and the ripple consumed it greedily. Leo's heart slammed against his ribs. He grabbed her shoulders, shaking her. Clara, fight it. Don't let it take you. His own voice felt fragile against the chant. Then, impossibly, her lips moved. Leo, her eyes opened the barest slit, but her gaze didn't find him. It rolled upward, fixed on the air above her, pupils dilated, as though she recognized the thing that hovered there, and for a moment she smiled. The ripple thickened, condensing into shadow. It loomed taller, stretching into limbs that bent wrong, too many joints folding and unfolding. Its edges bled into the air, refusing definition, but its hunger was sharp, palpable. Leo staggered back. His knees buckled as the pull increased, dragging not his body but his thoughts. His memories blurred at the edges, leaking. He saw Clara's wedding dress, her laughter in the tavern earlier that night, the glimmer of her eyes under lamplight, all of it being pulled like threads, unraveling toward the shadow. No, he screamed, slamming his palms into the floor as if to anchor himself. The chant from the suspended figures thundered louder, now perfectly in unison. Stay, stay, stay. One of the bound prisoners lifted his head. His eyes rolled white. His lips, cracked and bleeding, parted. Give her up, the voice rasped. Not his own. Dozens of voices speaking through one throat. You cannot take what is already taken. Leo's breath broke into sobs. He shook Clara again, dispirited. I won't leave you. The shadow bent lower, enveloping her chest. Another wisp tore free. Her body slackened further. In blind fury, Leo lunged forward. He threw himself across her body, wrapping his arms around her as though his own flesh could shield her soul. The pull intensified. His ribs compressed. His vision darkened at the edges. The shadow pressed against his back, seeping through him, whispering in 1,000 voices. Stay, stay, stay. His mouth opened against his will. Words poured out, not his own, but theirs. Stay with us. He clamped his teeth shut, tears streaming down his face. No, no, I won't. The light in the chamber flickered, pulsing like a dying heart. The ropes creaked. The bodies swayed violently, some thrashing as if the chant had consumed them. Dust and flakes of plaster rained from the unseen ceiling. The shadow reared, swelling higher, limbs unfurling into black branches that scraped the walls. It no longer bothered with subtlety. It pressed down with full weight, a storm of hunger. Clara's lips parted once more. Her eyes fluttered. And in the faintest breath, she whispered, "Help me." The words broke through Leo like fire. He roared, primal, defiant, throwing every ounce of will against the pull. His arms locked around her, his body shaking. He forced his memories back into his skull, gripping them like weapons. Her laugh, her warmth, her kiss under the rain. The shadow shrieked a sound not made for human ears. The glow flickered harder, plunging the chamber into spasms of light and dark. And then, the floor beneath Leo split. The world dropped away. He and Clara plunged into darkness. The chant cut off mid-breath, silenced as though a switch had been thrown. Only the rush of air remained, pulling them downward into an abyss that had no bottom. Leo clutched her tighter, pressing her against his chest, his scream lost in the void. The last thing he saw before the light vanished completely was the ripple of the shadow above, its faceless head tilted in something like amusement, watching them fall. They fell forever. At least that's how it felt to Leo, endless air rushing past, pulling at his hair, forcing tears from his eyes. He clutched Clara's limp body against his chest, his throat raw with a scream he no longer heard. The darkness had no bottom, no walls, no edges. And then, as suddenly as it began, the fall ended. They landed not with the bone-shattering impact he expected, but with a slow, dreadful softness, as though lowered onto damp soil. Leo gasped, rolling onto his side. The air was colder here, the smell thicker earth, mildew, copper, and something else he couldn't name. Something metallic and sweet, like rotting fruit. He pushed himself upright. This chamber was different, larger, deeper. He could not see the ceiling, nor the corners. The walls shimmered faintly, breathing in and out like lungs. And the ropes, they hung here too, but fewer now. Each one cradled a single figure, strung like puppets against the vastness. Their mouths moved still, lips cracked and bleeding, chanting in that same rhythm. But the words had changed. Not stay. Something worse. Give. Leo staggered, pulling Clara closer. Her skin was clammy, her chest shallow. Her eyelids fluttered, but her gaze was trapped behind them. Each time she exhaled, a faint wisp of vapor slipped out, eager to be taken. No, Leo whispered, pressing his hand over her mouth as if to keep it inside. Not hers. You can't have her. The chamber shuddered in reply. Shadows rippled across the breathing walls, elongating, folding, twisting into forms half recognizable. A child hunched on all fours, head lolling backward. A woman whose neck stretched like rope. An animal crouched low, its spine bent in impossible arches. Each shape emerged, then dissolved back into darkness. At the far side of the chamber, the glow deepened. A pit opened, ringed with stones, slick with something that glistened. Ropes descended into it, taut, vibrating as though they anchored to something below. The chanting grew louder. Give, give, give. Leo staggered backward, but his boots sank into the damp soil as though the floor clutched at him. He dragged Clara, stumbling, desperate for any exit, but the space behind him only stretched farther. The walls receding, retreating like a horizon. There was no door, no way back. The voices swelled. From the ropes above, the bound figures lifted their heads. Eyes rolled open, not white, not human, black, glossy, reflecting Leo's trembling figure. One of them spoke, not in chant, but clearly, as if chosen to bear the message. She belongs to the keeper, the others echoed, a single voice layered 100 times. And now, so to you. Leo clutched Clara tighter. No, you can't have her. His voice cracked, his throat raw. Take me instead. The chamber fell silent. Then laughter rippled through the walls. Not kind, not cruel, something emptier. A laugh for the sake of sound, echoing without joy. The ropes creaked, the bodies swayed, and the pit glowed brighter. From its depths, the shadow rose. It was larger now, no longer a ripple of bent air. It had shape, form, a body of darkness woven from smoke and ash, its limbs long enough to scrape the unseen ceiling. Where a face might have been was only a hollow, deeper than night, pulling light into it. The keeper, the rope strained, pulling the bodies downward, offering them like sacrifices. The chant resumed, fevered. Give, give, give. Clara stirred weakly in Leo's arms. Her lips parted. A voice that wasn't hers whispered through them. It already began the moment she entered. Leo shook her, tears spilling down his face. Fight it, Clara, please. Don't let it take you. Her eyes fluttered open, but they were black, reflecting the glow of the pit. She smiled faintly. You can't fight a room, she whispered. The keeper loomed closer. The pull began again, stronger than before. It tore at Leo's chest, clawed at his memories, his breath, his sense of self. He felt Clara slipping, her body growing lighter, as if dissolving in his arms. No! His scream echoed into the endless dark. He dropped to his knees, holding her tighter, pressing his face into her hair. You can have me. Just let her go. The voices swelled in approval. Give, give, give. The ropes descended, slithering across the soil like serpents. They coiled around Leo's wrists, his ankles, his throat. He thrashed, but the soil sucked him deeper, holding him in place. Clara slid from his arms, lifted by unseen hands, drifting toward the keeper's hollow face. Clara! His scream cracked. She turned once, her blackened eyes glistening, and for a moment, just a moment, He saw her, really her. Her lips trembled. A tear slipped down her cheek. Run. The ropes tightened, dragging him forward. His lungs burned. His vision swam. The keeper opened. Not a mouth, not eyes. Just opening a hollow, widening into an impossible abyss. The sound that poured from it was not sound at all, but silence sharpened into a blade. The bound figures screamed as one, their prayers dissolving into shrieks. Their bodies convulsed, ropes cutting deeper, blood dripping onto the soil like rain. Leo fought, straining against the pull. He clawed at the ropes, tearing skin from his hands. The keeper leaned closer, the abyss yawning wider, and Clara's body drifted higher, her soul unraveling in strands of light. Leo made his choice. He wrenched one arm free, the rope slicing his skin. He reached out, grabbed Clara's wrist, and pulled with every last ounce of strength. For a moment, the chamber screamed. The walls rippled, the soil cracked, the ropes snapped taut. Then everything went white. The light was blinding. Leo clutched Clara's wrist, refusing to let go. His lungs burned, his muscles screamed, his body half bound in the ropes. The keeper's hollow face yawned wider, spilling silence so thick it scraped his thoughts raw. And then, everything broke. The ropes snapped loose, recoiling like severed veins. The chanting collapsed into screams. The chamber's soil split open, fault lines racing outward, light bleeding from the cracks. The bodies suspended above convulsed, their whispers turning into shrieks that rattled the bones of the earth. Leo dragged Clara down, pulling her against him, shielding her with his body. The blinding glow surged upward, swallowing them whole. When his eyes opened again, there was no chamber, no ropes, no keeper, just silence. Leo lay on a floor of polished wood, his chest heaving, his clothes damp with sweat. The familiar scent of mothballs and old perfume clung to the air. Around him, racks of clothing stood silent, mannequins frozen in their crooked poses. The shop. He was back in the shop. Clara lay beside him. She stirred weakly, her eyelids fluttering open. For the first time since she vanished, she looked at him, really looked. Her eyes were her own again, wide, brown, wet with confusion. Leo? Her voice was a tremor. What happened? He choked on a sob, pulling her into his arms. You're safe. You're safe now. But even as he said it, he knew the words were a lie. The shopkeeper was gone, the counter empty. Leo staggered to his feet, half dragging Clara toward the door. His legs trembled with every step, his body screaming for rest. He shoved the door open. The rain had stopped. Outside, the city was quiet, the streets slick with water but empty of life. The bell above the door chimed as it closed behind them, the sound echoing strangely against the stone alley. They didn't stop. They ran. Through the twisting lanes, past shuttered cafes and dimly glowing lamps, until the shop was far behind. When they reached the police station, words tumbled out of Leo in ragged bursts. The shop, the fitting room, the crack, the bodies, the keeper. The officers exchanged glances, brows furrowed, lips pressed tight. One finally said, "Show us." They returned together, Clara clinging to Leo's arm, her steps unsteady. But when they arrived at the corner where the shop had stood, nothing, only a blank wall of brick, slick with rain. No door, no window, no sign a shop had ever existed. Leo's stomach dropped. No, it was here. It was right here. He pounded his fists against the wall, his voice cracking. "You have to believe me." The officers exchanged another glance. One shook his head. "There's nothing here, sir." They left him standing in the alley. Clara leaned against him, shivering. He wrapped his arms around her, though his own body shook harder. Then he noticed something on the ground, a scrap of paper, soaked but legible. He bent, lifting it with trembling fingers. The ink bled slightly, but the words were clear. "You have seen what you should not. Keep the secret, or the room will return." Leo's breath froze in his chest. His hand shook as he held the note. Clara stared at it, then at him. Her lips parted, but no sound came, because in that moment, they both heard it. Faint, from nowhere, from everywhere, the sound of a curtain swaying, and beneath it, a whisper, "Stay." They fled the city the next morning. No one believed them. Friends dismissed it as jet lag, as too much wine, as a dream fed by a strange old quarter. But Leo knew, because sometimes, when Clara drifted off to sleep beside him. Her lips moved faintly, whispering, repeating the word that would haunt him until the end of his days. Stay. The broken heartbeat. Some roads are lonelier than others. It isn't just the lack of cars or the silence of the night. It's the way the darkness presses against the windows, the way even your own breathing sounds too loud, as if the world has turned away and left you behind. That was the road Alex and Maya found themselves on. The night had begun tenderly enough. Dinner in town, laughter shared over too much wine, a kiss stolen beneath a flickering street lamp, the kind of date that makes the world feel safe, even in its imperfections. But now, miles outside the city, their car had sputtered, coughed, and died. The headlights still glowed, dim and yellow, casting a narrow tunnel of light down the empty asphalt. The rain had passed earlier, leaving the pavement slick, reflecting their stranded figures and broken fragments. Alex tried the ignition again. The engine groaned, then fell silent. He exhaled through his teeth. Great. Maya sat curled in the passenger seat, hugging her arms. She tried to smile. It's not the worst thing. At least we're not in a horror movie, right? Alex gave her a sideways look. His attempt at a smirk didn't quite land. Don't jinx us. He checked his phone. 1 bar of service. No signal strong enough to call. Nearest station's about a mile. He muttered, scrolling through the map he'd downloaded earlier. Not too bad. I'll walk. Get some help. You stay here. Maya's smile faltered. The road stretched in both directions. Empty, no lamps, no houses, just trees pressing close at the shoulders. By yourself? What if... Alex touched her hand. It's fine, I'll be quick. Safer than both of us walking in the dark. Keep the doors locked. Don't open them for anyone. His tone carried a finality she couldn't argue with. Maya wanted to protest, wanted to insist she come too. But the night was too deep, too cold. Her courage shrank beneath its weight. She nodded reluctantly. Promise you'll be fast, she whispered. Promise. He leaned across, kissed her forehead, then stepped out into the dark. The door shut with a heavy thud. Maya watched him in the side mirror, his figure receding down the road. His jacket caught the weak light of the headlights, a pale shape swallowed slowly by the black. His footsteps crunched faintly against the wet gravel shoulder. Steady, determined. Then the sound faded, and he was gone. She was alone. The car ticked softly, metal cooling after the failed engine. Maya shifted in her seat, listening to the hollow echo of her own heartbeat. She pressed the lock button 3 times, just to be sure. Each click reassured her only briefly. She reached for her phone. No bars, just the clock glowing against the black screen. 12:14 a.m. Minutes dragged. The quiet grew thicker. She turned the radio on. Static, a faint voice buried deep within, speaking words she couldn't make out. She snapped it off again, pulse racing. The silence returned. Maya leaned back, closing her eyes. She tried to imagine Alex's footsteps, tried to pretend she could still hear them. She pictured him reaching the station, calling a tow truck, returning with help. It was simple, ordinary. Her eyelids grew heavy. She drifted toward sleep. And then, tap. Her eyes shot open. The sound had come from above. She held her breath, listening. Nothing. Just silence again. Maybe a branch, she told herself. Maybe a squirrel. She settled back against the seat. Tap. Tap. 2 more. Deliberate. Her breath caught. This time she was certain. It wasn't random. It wasn't wind or animal. It was too heavy, too measured. It came from the roof. Maya's pulse hammered. She sat rigid, staring at the ceiling of the car, as though her eyes could pierce the thin layer of metal. Tap, 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 even, rhythmic, almost like her chest tightened, like a heartbeat. Bum, 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 her own heart answered, racing faster, until the 2 rhythms overlapped, confused her, left her dizzy. She fumbled for her phone again, holding it tight in her palm, though she knew there was no signal. The glow of the screen illuminated her trembling hands, her pale reflection in the glass. She whispered, Alex, please hurry. The tapping continued, steady, patient, like something waiting. The tapping didn't stop. Maya sat rigid in the driver's seat, her hands gripping her knees, her breath shallow. She tried to count the beats, tried to convince herself it was just branches swaying. or rain dripping, but the pattern was too precise. Tap, 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 even, steady, almost gentle, like someone drumming fingertips against the roof, or like the sound of a heart, magnified through metal. Her own pulse quickened, sinking, then stumbling over itself. Bum, bum, bum. She bit her lip until she tasted iron. Minutes stretched into hours, or maybe it was only seconds. Time bent strangely in the dark, each moment stretching too thin, collapsing under its own weight. Maya glanced at the dashboard clock. 12:21 a.m. Only 7 minutes had passed since Alex left. 7 minutes. It felt like a lifetime. She squeezed her eyes shut, whispering to herself, "It's nothing. Just my imagination. Just the car cooling. Just the wind." The roof answered her with a single, sharp knock. Bum. Her eyes flew open. She dared a glance at the mirrors. The rear view reflected only black. The road behind them was a tunnel of nothing, swallowed whole by the trees. The side mirrors showed faint glimmers of wet branches, shivering in the starlight. But no figure, no movement, and yet she felt it. The sensation prickled across her skin, being watched, like unseen eyes pressed against the glass, studying every breath she took. Her chest rose and fell too quickly. She pressed the lock button again. Click. Click. The sound was sharp, useless comfort. Then the tapping resumed. Faster this time. Tap, 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 tap. The rhythm quickened, like a heartbeat accelerating into panic. Maya pressed her palms over her ears. The sound still pressed through, not just heard, but felt, vibrating through the frame of the car, through the hollow of her chest. She reached for the radio again, desperate for distraction. Static hissed. Beneath it, faintly, a voice whispered, "Don't look up." She gasped and slammed it off. The silence was worse. Her phone screen glowed faintly in her lap. She tried Alex again. Still no signal, just the mockery of the empty bars. She typed a message anyway. "Please hurry. Something's wrong, I'm scared." The message hung unsent, trapped in limbo. Her hands trembled. She placed the phone face down, as though hiding its failure. The tapping changed. It was no longer random. It had rhythm now, a syncopation, almost like a message. Bum, 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 bum. She realized with dawning horror what it mimicked. A heart monitor. Beep, beep, beep. Her breath stuttered. She remembered the sound from hospital visits, the steady reassurance of machines marking life, except now it was on the roof, echoing through metal and growing faster. She curled lower in the seat, hugging herself, whispering Alex's name like a prayer. Bum bum, bum bum, bum bum. The sound pounded above her, rattling the frame, shaking the rearview mirror until her reflection fractured. Her pulse raced to match, then silence, so sudden it felt like a blow. The absence of sound pressed against her ears, a vacuum. She dared not breathe. She waited, counted. 1, 2, 3. Then, bang, the roof shook violently. Maya screamed, clapping her hands over her mouth too late. Her voice had already escaped into the night. Her phone buzzed suddenly in her lap. Screen lighting. She snatched it up. Message failed to send, but another notification blinked. Uxie new voicemail. Her breath caught. She hadn't heard it ring. She pressed play with trembling fingers. Static. Then a voice. Her own voice. "Don't open the door." The message ended. The phone slipped from her hand, clattering onto the floor mat. Maya's chest heaved. She sank down, curling into the narrow space between the driver's seat and the door. The tapping began again, slow, deliberate, like someone pacing above her head. Left, right, left. Each step a thud that rattled her bones. She pressed her eyes shut, shaking. "Alex, please come back." The footsteps stopped. The silence grew unbearable. She opened her eyes. The rearview mirror tilted on its own, angling down toward her. And in its cracked reflection, a pale shape leaned over the roof, faceless but watching. The reflection in the rearview didn't vanish. Maya froze, every nerve firing with the certainty that she was no longer imagining things. A pale curve of a head, faceless, leaned over the roof. The mirror quivered slightly, distorted by the steady thrum on the car's metal skin. Bum, 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 The sound was slower now, measured, almost mocking. Her breath rattled in her throat. She curled lower, pressing her back against the door, one hand clamped tight over her mouth. Her pulse raced so fast it made her temples ache. The mirror tilted again, just a fraction, as though nudged by an unseen hand. The pale reflection sharpened smooth skin stretched too tightly. No mouth, no eyes. Just a blank, colorless mask leaning over the darkness. The tapping grew louder. Bum, bum, bum. Then faster. Bum, 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 bum. Like a heart in panic. Like her own heart, but outside her body, drumming against the roof. Maya snapped her gaze away, staring instead at the dashboard. The clock glowed faintly. 12:39 a.m. Alex had been gone 25 minutes. It felt like years. She grabbed her phone again, hands trembling. Still no signal. But the voicemail remained on the screen, her own voice, warning herself not to open the door. Her stomach twisted. She deleted it, as if that could erase what she'd heard. The moment the message vanished, the pounding intensified. Bum, 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 bum. The whole car shook, metal reverberating, the roof flexing as though caving under the force. The rearview mirror snapped loose, dangling from its mount, reflecting nothing but violent tremors. Maya screamed, curling into a ball on the floor of the back seat. Her breath came in ragged gasps, each inhale tasting of rust and rubber. The pounding matched her panic, accelerating until it no longer sounded like tapping but like fists slamming against her chest. She pressed her palms against her ears, rocking. It's not real. It's not real. It's not. The roof caved inward. Only an inch, but enough. The sheet metal groaned, bowing as though dented by something heavy crouching above. Her head snapped up. Tears blurred her vision. She forced herself to look at the ceiling. A bulge traveled across the roof, slow and deliberate, pressing downward as though a body crawled on all fours above her. Each movement left the metal quivering, the sound booming like a giant's heartbeat. Bum, bum, bum. It moved toward the driver's side door, then back toward the trunk, then forward again, circling like a predator testing the cage. Her phone buzzed again. She flinched violently, fumbling to pick it up. A new notification pulsed across the cracked screen. Incoming call. Alex. Her chest leapt. She answered immediately. Alex. Oh, thank God, where are you? Static hissed. Then, faintly, his voice. Maya. Her relief turned to ice. His voice was distorted, hollow, stretched. Maya. Don't look up. The call cut out. Her breath strangled in her throat. The pounding stopped. Utter silence. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The silence was worse than the pounding, empty, heavy, expectant. Slowly, trembling, she raised her eyes toward the windshield. Through the glass, under the weak spill of the headlights, a figure stood, tall, motionless, pale face, featureless, except for a mouth that hadn't been there before. It hung open, impossibly wide. In its hand gleamed something blunt, heavy, a hammer. Her scream stuck in her throat. She dropped to the floorboard, pressing her face into the seat, praying the glass would hold. The figure moved. She didn't hear footsteps, only the boom as it landed on the roof again. The hammer struck down. Bang. The metal shuddered. Dust rained from the interior lining. Bang. Bang. Each strike faster, louder. The rhythm wild, chaotic, like a heart about to rupture. Maya clutched her head, sobbing. Stop. Please stop. Oh. The hammering only grew more frenzied. Bum, 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 bum. Her own pulse blurred into the sound until she couldn't tell if it was her heartbeat or the car's. The windows fogged from her breath. She clawed at the glass, leaving frantic streaks. She wanted to run, to fling the door open, but her own recorded voice echoed in her head. Don't open the door. She froze, caught in the trap of her own warning. The hammering stopped. A shadow fell across the fogged window. Fingers pressed against the glass from outside. Long, pale, too many joints, tapping delicately. Bum, bum, bum. Slow again. Patient, as though mocking her terror. The phone buzzed one last time. Another voicemail. She hesitated, then pressed play with shaking hands. Static. Then Alex's voice. Soft, broken. They have my heart. The message ended. Maya dropped the phone. Her body shook with sobs. Her forehead pressed against her knees. The hammer struck once more. Bang, and then silence. She dared to lift her head. The windshield was cracked. Through the fractured glass, the figure leaned closer, its face inches away. No longer blank. Two hollow eyes stared in. Empty sockets dripping black. Its mouth stretched impossibly wide, and the sound that spilled from it wasn't words, but the deafening echo of her own heartbeat. Bum bum, bum bum, bum bum. Her scream finally broke free, and the night swallowed it whole, the windshield spider webbed with cracks. Maya couldn't breathe. She pressed herself against the seat, fingers digging into the upholstery, her gaze locked on the hollow eyes peering in through the fractured glass. The figure's mouth gaped wider, distending until the skin split at the corners. The sound that poured out wasn't speech, it was the thunder of a heartbeat, magnified and distorted, shaking the entire car. Bum bum, bum bum, bum bum. The mirrors rattled. The doors shook on their hinges. Her own pulse lost all rhythm, skipping and stumbling until she couldn't tell whether the sound came from inside her chest or from outside. The hammer rose slowly, gleaming in the pale spill of the headlights. Then it struck. Bang. The windshield dented inward, glass shards raining across the dashboard. Maya screamed, curling into a ball, arms over her head. Her throat burned, the sound raw and endless. Bang, bang, bang. Each strike deeper, harder, faster. Glass exploded in fragments, peppering her skin with cuts. The air filled with the stink of blood and hot metal. The hammering matched no rhythm now. It was chaos, frenzied, a heart tearing itself apart. Her phone buzzed somewhere on the floor. She snatched at it blindly, her hands slick with sweat. The screen glowed once before the battery died, flickering black, and in that instant, silence fell again. She risked a glance. The figure was gone. Only the shattered windshield remained, the night yawning empty beyond it. Her chest heaved, lungs tearing at the air. Maybe it was over. Maybe the thing had gone. Maybe she'd imagined it. Then something cold brushed the back of her neck. She spun, shrieking. Fingers pressed against the inside of the rear window. They dragged slowly down the glass, leaving streaks that glowed faintly red. Her stomach lurched. Blood. The car shook violently, rocking side to side as though something enormous clung to it. The suspension groaned, tires squealing against the wet pavement. She slammed both hands on the horn. The blare tore through the night, wild and desperate. The sound died almost instantly, strangled by the pressure of the heartbeat pounding through metal. Bum bum, bum bum, bum bum. Her vision blurred with tears. Alex, she screamed into the void. Where are you? No answer. Only the drum of the hammer. Bang. The driver's side window fractured. A pale face pressed against it, eyes black and bottomless, mouth twitching with glee. Bang. The rear window splintered. Hands smeared with blood pounded against it, leaving trails like veins crawling across the glass. The car was no longer a car. It was a coffin, a rib cage, and something wanted to split it open to get at the heart inside. Her heart. The hammer struck again, and this time the glass burst outward, a hole gaping in the windshield. Cold night air rushed in, sharp and wet. The figure crawled forward through the gap. Its movements were jerky, insect-like, elbows bending wrong, knees scraping along the hood. Its hammer scraped the roof, metal screaming under its weight. Maya sobbed, curling deeper into the footwell. Her mind screamed at her to run, to fling the door open and sprint into the trees. But her own recorded voice echoed again. Don't open the door. Her body locked. The figure slid closer, its face dipping into the car. No features now, only hollows, black pits where eyes and mouth should be. From them spilled the sound of Alex's voice, broken, pleading. They took my heart. Her blood froze. The hammer lifted. Maya squeezed her eyes shut, whispering the only prayer she remembered. Please, not me, not me, not me. The blow never landed. Instead, the roof caved all at once, collapsing inward. Metal screamed. The hammer struck not the glass, but the steel frame, and the sound reverberated like a bell tolling the end of the world. The car shuddered violently, bouncing on its suspension. Her ears rang, vision flashing white. When it cleared, the figure was gone again. Only the echo of the heartbeat remained, pounding from every corner of the car. Bum, 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 bum. It was inside now, inside the steel, inside her bones. Maya pressed her hands against her chest, gasping. She could feel it there, something else beating alongside her heart, out of sync, demanding control. Each throb rattled her ribs, clawed at her lungs. Her breath shortened. Her body shook violently. She could no longer tell if the sound was coming from outside the car or from within her. The dashboard clock flickered, then died. The headlights sputtered out, plunging her into pure darkness. The only light left came from faint streaks glowing across the roof. Words, scrawled in blood. "Don't make me wait." Her scream tore through the dark. The hammer struck one last time, splitting the door at her side. Cold air exploded in, bringing with it the scent of iron and decay. The figure leaned in, filling the space. Its hollow eyes burned now with faint red light, its mouth stretching wider, wide enough to swallow the night. The pounding reached its peak, faster, louder, until it was no longer rhythm but a roar. Maya pressed herself into the corner, clawing at the door handle in blind desperation. She pulled once, twice, and froze. Her voicemail's voice hissed again in her ears, though her phone was dead. "Don't open the door." Her hand trembled on the handle. The figure raised its hammer. The roar became silence, and in that silence, she heard Alex's voice, close, warm, tender whisper into her ear. "Maya, run." The world ended in silence. Maya remembered the hammer raised above her, the hollow eyes filling her vision, Alex's voice whispering one last word. Run, and then nothing. No sound, no light. Just a stillness so deep it pressed against her lungs, forcing her into unconsciousness. Morning. Sunlight cut across the broken highway. A police cruiser slowed, tires hissing on damp asphalt. The officers had been dispatched after a motorist reported a car left abandoned in the middle of the road. They expected a drunk driver, or a stranded traveler who'd walked for help. What they found was something else entirely. The car sat crooked, its hood crumpled, windshield shattered. Dried blood streaked the glass in jagged lines, blackened by the morning Sunday. The tires were sunk into the wet shoulder, mud clinging like claws. One officer approached cautiously, hand resting on his holster. The other circled wide, scanning the tree line. "Jesus Christ," the first whispered, because inside, curled on the passenger side floor, was a girl. Her eyes were wide open, fixed on nothing. Her hands trembled against her chest, clutching at air, as though trying to hold something invisible. Her lips moved soundlessly, repeating the same word over and over. Bum, bum, bum. A heartbeat. Maya Carter, 21. One officer muttered after checking the ID in her purse. "She's alive, barely responsive. Call it in." They tried speaking to her. She didn't blink, didn't focus. Her mouth kept shaping the phantom rhythm. When they tried to lift her out, she shrieked so violently they had to pause, covering their ears against the raw animal sound. Then she collapsed again, whispering the beat. She was alive, but something inside her had broken. The second officer's shout carried from the ditch. Found him. They rushed to the slope, and there he was. Alex, his body sprawled across the mud, face tilted toward the gray sky. His chest was caved in, sternum shattered, ribs split wide like doors forced open. Where his heart should have been was only an empty cavity, edges torn ragged. Flies already hovered. One officer gagged, turning away. The other crossed himself, murmuring, "God help us." Back at the car, the evidence deepened the nightmare. On the roof, scrawled in jagged streaks of blood, were words that had not dried evenly, as though written by a trembling hand. "Don't ever make me wait." The letters dripped onto the windshield, running in crooked lines down the spider-webbed glass. The officers stepped back, faces pale. This wasn't vandalism. This wasn't a crash. This was something else. Something they couldn't write in a report. Later, Maya was taken to the hospital. She resisted every hand that touched her, every attempt to soothe her. Machines monitored her vital signs, each beep steady, indifferent, but her lips never stopped moving. Over and over, whispering in time with the monitor. Bum, bum, bum. Doctors called it shock, trauma-induced psychosis. But the nurses who stayed with her overnight swore they heard something else. Not just her lips, the sound coming from her chest. A second heartbeat. The file, The official police report was thin. Vehicle found on Highway 12. Abandoned. Victim A, female. Located in vehicle. Alive but unresponsive. Victim B, male. Located nearby. Deceased due to severe chest trauma. Case remains open. Possible foul play. But the photos told a different story. The roof of the car dented inward in multiple places, as though struck by impossible force. Blood patterns inconsistent with impact, dripping upward as if defying gravity. And the words on the roof. Even in black and white, they seemed to glow. Epilogue. Weeks later, the car was towed to an impound lot. Workers assigned to scrap it found themselves unsettled, because whenever they touched the frame, they swore they felt something. A faint vibration, like a heartbeat. One man quit after hearing it echo through his gloves. Another refused to enter the lot at night, muttering that he'd seen a pale face reflected in the cracked windshield. The car was eventually destroyed, crushed, melted, erased. But the workers whispered that even in the furnace, the steel groaned in rhythm. Bum, bum, bum. And Maya? She never recovered. She avoided roads at night. She refused to enter cars alone. She never spoke of Alex again. But those who visited her said they sometimes caught her tilting her head, listening, smiling faintly, as though someone were still whispering to her. And when they leaned close enough, they swore they could hear it too. Not the fragile beat of her own heart, but a second one. Slower, stronger, waiting. The child who taps. They say every child remembers the first night they were left truly alone. For some, it's uneventful. The hum of the refrigerator, the glow of a nightlight, hours that pass with nothing more sinister than boredom. For others, it's the night the silence learns how to speak. Lily had begged for this, 12 years old, almost a teenager, tired of being treated like she needed someone hovering over her shoulder. Tonight, her parents were at a dinner across town, and she had sworn she'd be fine. I'll lock the doors. I'll brush my teeth. I'll be in bed before 10, she'd promised. They'd left her with a kiss, a reminder to call if anything felt strange, and the hush of headlights retreating down the street. Now, at 11:30, she lay in her bed, wide awake. The house was too quiet. Every sound she usually ignored grew teeth. The hum of the heater pressed against her eardrums. The occasional creak of settling wood made her flinch. Even her own heartbeat sounded like it belonged to someone else, following her too closely beneath the blankets. She shifted on the mattress, staring at the ceiling. Her bedside lamp burned low, throwing pale gold across the posters on her walls, the messy stack of books on the floor, the open closet door she'd forgotten to shut. Sleep didn't come. Something else did. Tap, tap. She froze. The sound was sharp, deliberate, from the direction of her window. Her first thought, a branch. The maple tree in the yard sometimes scraped against the glass on windy nights, except the air was still. Her second thought, a bird. But no bird knocked in rhythm. Tap, tap, steady, like knuckles rapping against glass. She pulled the blanket to her chin. It's nothing, she whispered to herself. It's just nothing. But her eyes betrayed her. They slid toward the window. The curtains hung still, a thin shield of fabric. The glow of the street lamp outside seeped around the edges. She told herself not to look, and still, she slid out of bed. Her bare feet brushed the cold floorboards. Each step popped faintly against the silence. She reached the curtain and pinched the fabric. Slowly, she drew it aside. The yard stared back at her, empty. The grass glittered faintly with frost. The branches of the maple hung still. The street lamp buzzed, a halo of moths circling. No bird, no branch, no person. Her breath fogged faintly against the glass. Relief washed through her, thin and temporary. She let the curtain fall back, muttering, "See? Nothing. Just the house." She climbed into bed again, curling onto her side. And then she saw it. On her desk, by the lamp, where her sketchbooks and pencils lay scattered something new. A sheet of paper. She sat up, heart lurching. She hadn't left paper there. She knew she hadn't. The sheet was plain, edges sharp like it had been placed carefully. Drawn on it, in dark crayon, was a child. A small figure, round head, stick-thin arms, and behind it, square lines forming a window. The child stood outside, one hand raised, touching the glass. Lily's throat went dry. She hadn't drawn it. She hadn't seen it before. Her legs carried her forward anyway, as if curiosity had bound them with strings. She reached for the page, fingertips trembling. The waxy texture of crayon dragged beneath her skin. Her stomach turned. The child's face had no features, just a blank circle, with shading pressed so hard the paper nearly tore. Behind her, the window sounded again. Tap, tap. She dropped the drawing. It landed face up, the child's hand forever pressed against the window it had been drawn to haunt. Her own window pulsed with sound once more, knuckles drumming against glass that should have been untouched. Her knees weakened. She stumbled back toward her bed, eyes locked on the curtain. "Go away," she whispered. The room didn't answer, but the tapping did. Tap, tap, tap. The lamp flickered, shadows sliding across the walls like ink, spilled too quickly. Lily crawled under the blankets, curling herself small, clutching the edge to her chin. Her heart pounded so loudly she swore it might answer the rhythm outside. She tried to count. She tried to pray. She tried to believe her parents would be home soon, but the window kept calling, and on the desk, the drawing waited. The faceless child's crayon hand lifted in eternal invitation. The tapping stopped. For a moment, the silence returned so suddenly Lily wondered if she'd dreamed the entire thing. She pressed the blanket against her chest, staring across the room at the desk where the drawing lay. The crayon figure seemed to watch her from the paper, faceless and patient. She tried to breathe slowly, to imagine her parents' voices, their car pulling into the driveway, the jangle of keys in the lock. But then, tap, 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 louder this time. The window shivered faintly in its frame. Lily swallowed hard. She couldn't hide under the blankets forever. She slid out of bed, knees shaking, her bare feet whispering against the boards. Each step closer to the desk made the drawing loom larger, its waxy lines catching the lamplight. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. The picture had changed. She knew it instantly. The stick-thin child no longer stood at a window. Now it was closer, filling more of the page. The hand that once pressed politely against glass was now a fist, knocking. Knock, knock, knock. The crayon lines dug deeper, jagged, frantic, and below, scrawled in shaky letters, a new word had appeared. Lily. Her breath caught. Her name. She dropped the paper, backing away until she hit the edge of the bed. The tapping outside followed her retreat. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was perfectly matched to the drawing, as if the faceless child on the page had learned how to speak through glass and wood. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She forced herself toward the curtain. Her hand shook violently as she reached for the fabric. "Please," she whispered. "Please let it be nothing." "Oh." She yanked the curtain aside. The yard stared back, empty as before. No child, no shadow, nothing but frost glinting faintly in the lamplight. And yet the sound continued, right against the glass. Tap, tap, tap. But there was nothing there. Her throat tightened. She stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the dropped drawing. She snatched it up again, desperate to prove to herself she hadn't imagined the change. The paper quivered in her hands. The figure had moved again, no longer outside the window. Now it stood inside the room, stick-thin arms, blank circle face, and beside it, drawn in, hurried, shaky strokes of bed. Her bed, the figure stood at its edge, hand lifted, as though ready to pull the blanket back. Lily's scream tore the silence apart. She flung the paper across the room, its corner catching on the lamp before sliding to the floor. Her heart raced so hard she thought it might split her chest. The tapping stopped, but only for a heartbeat. Then it started again, this time from the window downstairs. Tap, 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 lower, harder, echoing through the bones of the house. She bolted from her room, feet pounding the stairs. Every creak sounded like a warning, every shadow a hand reaching. She clutched the railing, breath sharp, throat burning. The living room spread out below her, dim shapes of furniture crouching like animals in the gloom. The front window glowed faintly from the street lamp outside. The tapping came from there now, steady, measured, tap, tap, tap. She crept closer, every instinct screaming to run the other way. But she couldn't stop herself, her eyes locked on the window, waiting for a face to appear. Nothing, only darkness pressing against the glass. yet the tapping never missed a beat. The phone on the kitchen counter caught her eye. She lunged for it, fumbling with trembling fingers. She dialed her mother's number. The line clicked. Static hissed. Then came the sound of breathing. Shallow, childlike. "Hello?" Lily whispered. The breathing continued. Then, a giglet, high-pitched, thin. The line went dead. She dropped the phone, hands shaking violently. The tapping quickened. Tap, 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 tap. Her head snapped toward the window. The glass shuddered in its frame, vibrating as though struck by more than fingers. Each knock carried weight, intention, hunger. She stumbled backward, heart slamming, whispering, "No, no, no." The front door loomed behind her. She rushed to it, grabbed the knob, twisted. It didn't move. Locked. She tried again, rattling it violently, but it wouldn't budge. It felt sealed, as though the wood itself had decided to betray her. Behind her, the tapping turned into pounding. Bang, bang, bang. The whole house seemed to echo with it. She pressed her forehead to the door, tears spilling down her cheeks. She whispered through clenched teeth, "Go away. Please just go away." The pounding stopped. Her breath caught. The silence pressed harder than the noise had. Then, a single knock, deliberate, soft, right against the glass beside her. She turned her head, and there, in the faint reflection of the street lamp, a face stared back. Small, pale, eyes black and endless. Its lips didn't move, but the words pressed into her mind, cold and whispering. "Let me in." The whisper hadn't left her. Even as she pulled away from the door, even as her bare feet scraped against the hardwood, she still heard it lodged inside her skull like a splinter. "Let me in." Her pulse drummed so loud she thought it might break her ribs. She clutched her chest, as if she could hold it still. Then the knocking started again. Not at the front window. Not at just one place. Everywhere. Tap, tap, tap. From the kitchen window. Tap, tap, tap. From the glass door to the backyard. Tap, tap, tap. From the small square window above the sink. Each knock echoed the next, weaving into rhythm. The house itself vibrated with the cadence. It wasn't random anymore. It was deliberate. A heartbeat. Bum, bum, bum. Lily spun, chest heaving. Every direction brought the same sound, layered on itself, pulsing through the walls and floorboards. She pressed her palms over her ears, but the sound didn't stop. It was inside her bones, her teeth, rattling her skull. She stumbled toward the couch, dropping behind it, curling small. The living room lamp flickered above her, shadows stretching across the ceiling like veins branching from a heart. The knocking grew louder. Bang, bang, bang. Each window, each door, shaking in its frame. It wasn't a house anymore. It was a chest cavity, and something wanted out. Her eyes darted to the drawing she dropped earlier. She hadn't brought it downstairs, but it was there now lying on the carpet a few feet away. The faceless child had grown larger again, arms longer, hands pressed against multiple windows drawn in frantic crayon strokes. And this time, the face wasn't blank. 2 black circles, eyes, staring at her. She bit down on her scream, throat tight, rocking back and forth behind the couch. "It's not real! It's not real!" The knocking stopped. Silence. Too sudden. Too complete. She lifted her head slightly over the couch. The windows were still. The curtains swayed faintly in the draft, but nothing moved beyond. Her breath came sharp, shallow, like a swimmer surfacing after too long underwater. Then, one knock, right behind her, on the sliding glass door. She twisted around, heart seizing. Through the glass, pressed flat against it, was a child's hand. Small, pale, knuckles bent raw. It tapped once more, and the house seemed to echo with the sound. Tap. Lily bolted, scrambling across the carpet, slamming into the hallway. Her shoulder clipped the wall, pain bursting across her arm. She didn't stop. She ran upstairs, taking the steps 2 at a time, breath tearing at her throat. The knocking followed, not from behind, from above, from below, from every direction at once. The whole house beat with it. Bum, 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 bum. Her vision blurred. The walls seemed to pulse, wallpaper flexing like skin. The floor trembled beneath her, each plank groaning in rhythm. She stumbled into her room and slammed the door. Her lamp still burned on the desk. The drawing was there too, though she'd left it downstairs. Now the child stood inside the room, right at her bed, one hand outstretched. The other hand held something new, a crayon, dark red, and across the bottom of the page, in jagged strokes, a sentence appeared even as she watched. "Play with me." Her throat locked. The knocking began again, this time against her bedroom window. Louder, faster. The glass rattled in the frame, dust falling from the sill. She staggered backward, pressed against the door. Her legs shook violently. The window bulged inward with each knock. Bang, bang, bang. She could see a shadow now, small and hunched, pacing just beyond the curtain. The rhythm matched her pulse, sinking, then overtaking it, until her heart struggled to keep up. She dropped to her knees, hands clamped over her ears, sobbing. "Stop, please stop." The knocking stopped. For a moment, only her ragged breathing filled the room. Then a new sound began, scratching, not from the window, from inside the closet. She turned her head slowly, dread pulling at her like chains. The closet door was open, a crack, darkness pooling within. The scratching grew louder, like nails dragging across wood. Then 3 taps, soft and clear, from inside the closet. Tap, tap, tap. Her scream broke the silence at last. The scratching inside the closet stopped. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the window rattled so violently that the glass squealed in its frame. The curtain billowed, though no wind moved outside. The pane bulged inward, a pressure building, as if something pressed from the other side. And at the same time, the closet door creaked, inch by inch, darkness spilling out, heavier than shadow, thick like smoke. Lily backed into the corner between the bed and the wall, hugging herself so tightly her fingernails carved crescents into her skin. "No," she whispered, voice breaking. "No, no, no." The tapping resumed, but now it came from both places at once. Tap, 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 from the window. Tap, 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 from the closet, perfectly in sync, like 2 hands knocking in rhythm, like a duet, like a heartbeat split in 2. Her desk lamp flickered violently, shadows jumping like marionettes across the walls. The drawing still lay on the desk, and she swore she saw the crayon move, dragging itself across the paper. Lines appeared, frantic, jerking. The child was no longer faceless. The black circles of its eyes dripped down the page, staining the desk like ink, and beneath them, mouth curved into a smile, jagged, wrong. Words formed beneath it. "I'm here." The window burst open. Cold air exploded into the room, scattering papers, ripping at her blanket. Frost coated the sill in seconds, feathers of ice spreading across the glass. A hand reached inside, small, pale, fingers jointed too many times, bending backwards as they tapped delicately against the wood. The closet door banged wide, slamming against the wall. Inside was no shelf, no hanging clothes, only black, a void that seemed deeper than the room itself. And from that void, another hand reached out, identical, small, pale, tapping. The rhythm grew faster. Window, closet, window, closet, tap tap, tap tap, tap tap. The house shook with it, her bones rattling inside her skin. Her heart tried to match the pace, stuttering painfully in her chest. She clamped her hands over her ears, screaming, "Stop!" The tapping stopped. Her scream died in her throat. Silence. And then, a child stepped through the closet. It was small, no taller than her shoulder. Its skin was colorless, stretched thin over narrow bones. Its hair hung in stringy clumps, damp as if it had just climbed out of water. But its eyes, black, not pupils, not irises, just voids that seemed to swallow light. It tilted its head, studying her with curiosity, like a bug pinned to cardboard. The window creaked again. Another figure began to crawl through. Identical, 2 children now, both faceless once, both wearing her name scrawled across their arms in jagged crayon. Lily pressed into the corner until the plaster dug into her spine. Tears blurred her sight, her body trembling so hard she thought her bones might snap. The first child stepped closer, feet silent on the floorboards. Each movement was accompanied by a faint knock, though its hands hung limp at its sides. The second slid fully into the room from the window, head twisting unnaturally to watch her. They moved in unison, one from the closet, one from the window, closing the space between them until she was trapped. She tried to scream, but her voice failed. Only a faint whimper left her lips. The first child leaned down, face inches from hers. Its breath was cold, damp, smelling faintly of dirt and mildew. Its mouth opened, too wide, cracking at the corners. The whisper slithered out, "Play with me." The second echoed, perfectly in sync, "Play with me." Their voices overlapped, doubled, becoming a chant that filled the room. "Play with me. Play with me. Play with me." The walls throbbed with it. The lamp flickered once, then died, plunging the room into blackness. The knocking resumed, but now it came from every surface, not just the window, not just the closet, the floor, the ceiling, the walls, hands, dozens of them, tapping in rhythm. Bum, bum, bum. The entire house beat like a heart, enclosing her inside its pulse. Her scream finally ripped free, raw and endless. The children smiled wider and stepped closer. The darkness swallowed her scream. The walls pulsed with sound knuckles, palms, fists, every surface pounding in rhythm. Bum, bum, bum. The house was no longer a house. It was a heart, and she was trapped inside its ribcage. The children stepped closer, one from the window, one from the closet. Their feet made no sound on the floorboards, yet every movement was accompanied by a knock, a vibration that shook her bones. "Play with me," they whispered together. The words overlapped, sank into her ears, threaded through her pulse until she couldn't tell if it was them speaking or her own heart begging. Lily's back pressed into the wall. She tried to curl smaller, to vanish into herself. Her lips formed the word no, but it never left her mouth. The first child crouched, tilting its head as though studying a toy it hadn't figured out how to use. Its eyes, those bottomless pits, reflected nothing. The second child lifted its hand and tapped her knee. Tap, gentle, deliberate, like a reminder. She flinched so violently she banged her head against the wall. The pain barely registered. "Go away," she whispered. "Please, just go away." They smiled wider, their mouths opened too far, cheeks splitting, teeth that weren't really teeth glistening like shards of broken glass. "Play with me," they repeated, louder this time. The knocking from the walls joined in, a chorus of fists, the floor beneath her vibrating until she thought it might crack. Her desk lamp flickered once more, sputtering to life. In its glow, the drawing lay open across the desk. It had changed again. The child was no longer outside a window, no longer at her bed. Now there were three figures, two children, holding hands, and between them, a third shape, smaller, rounder, its face left blank, but above it, scrawled in the same frantic crayon, one word: Lily. Her breath hitched. She shook her head violently, tears flying. "No, that's not me, that's not..." The first child leaned closer, its lips brushing her ear. The whisper was colder than ice. "It is now." The window slammed shut with a crack. The closet door banged closed. The pounding from the walls ceased all at once. Silence fell. Tout complete. She dared to open her eyes. The room was empty. No children, no tapping, only the desk lamp, glowing faint and sickly. The drawing still lay open. Three figures hand in hand, her name still scrawled beneath the smallest. She crawled forward on shaking hands and knees, desperate to tear the page, to burn it, to end whatever this was. Her fingers touched the paper. It was warm, and beneath her palm, she felt it, a heartbeat. Bum, bum, bum. Her scream tore out again, but this time the house did not echo it. No one came, no one answered. Only the drawing throbbed beneath her hand, the crayon figures vibrating faintly, as though they were breathing. She stumbled back, clutching her chest, sobbing. The lamp flickered and died. Darkness claimed her room. Morning, when her parents returned, the house was silent. The front door opened easily under their key. The lights flickered on, humming with ordinary electricity. They called her name. No answer. Upstairs, her bed was empty. The window closed. The closet shut. On the desk lay a single sheet of paper. Three children, hand in hand, smiling wide. The smallest wore a dress that looked very much like Lily's. And beneath the crayon strokes, the words were written clearer than ever. Thank you for playing. Epilogue. Some neighbors swore they still hear it. Late at night, a soft knocking. On windows, on doors, sometimes gentle, sometimes frantic. Always in threes. Tap, tap, tap. And if you listen too long, if you lean close enough to the glass, you might hear a whisper threading through the silence. A child's voice. I want you to play with me. The lullaby of the sea. The first night in the house smelled of salt. Sarah had unpacked half the boxes, her hands raw from folding cardboard, her back aching from bending over. The air inside the cottage still felt unfamiliar, though the realtor had insisted it was charming. Whitewashed walls, exposed beams, creaking floors, windows that faced nothing but sea and sky. Her husband, Daniel, had already collapsed on the sofa, one arm slung over his eyes. Tomorrow, he'd mumbled. We'll deal with the rest tomorrow. That left Sarah alone with Emily, their 2-year-old daughter. The little girl had been restless since sunset, her small fists rubbing at her eyes, her cheeks damp from overtired tears. The house was too strange, Sarah told herself. Too empty. A child could feel that sort of thing. She gathered Emily into her arms, humming softly as she climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor. Emily's new room was small, with one wide window that looked directly over the ocean. Sarah had left the curtains half-drawn, but still the moonlight pressed its silver weight against the glass, spilling across the floorboards. The crib sat in the corner, a familiar anchor among all the strangeness. Sarah lowered her daughter into it, brushing damp curls from the girl's forehead. There we go, she whispered. Safe, warm, nothing to worry about. Ebses. Emily's eyes blinked up at her, heavy but resistant. She whined softly, a sound Sarah knew too well, exhaustion wrestling with fear. Sarah hesitated. Then she began to sing. It was a tune she barely remembered, something the old woman in the cottage next door had hummed earlier that afternoon. A fragment of melody, old and lilting, half-spoken in the way folk songs often are. Sarah hadn't asked where the neighbor had learned it. She'd only laughed nervously when the woman said, It's what we've always sung here. The sea likes to be remembered. Now, in the hush of Emily's room, Sarah let the words slip past her lips. Her voice was low, almost uncertain. Sleep, little one. Sleep. The tide will rock you deep. The sound floated into the air like threads of smoke. The melody curled gently, soothing and strange. Emily's eyes fluttered, but not in peace. They widened, sudden, as though startled. Her small hands clutched the blanket tightly, knuckles pale. Sarah faltered. Shh, it's okay, she murmured, stroking Emily's cheek. It's just a song, just a lullaby. She began again, firmer this time, hoping the steadiness would calm them both. Sleep, little one, sleep. The waves will guard your keep. That was when she heard it, not her own voice. Something else, a whisper, low and rolling, like breath through hollow stone. It rose from beyond the window, weaving itself into the melody. Not an echo, an answer. Sarah froze mid-note, her mouth hanging open. The room fell silent but for Emily's soft whimpers. Then it came again, faint, beneath the crash of waves on the rocks below, a rhythm that almost matched hers, slipping just out of sync, as though the ocean itself were trying to remember the words. Sarah's heart thudded. She turned her head slowly toward the window. The sea stretched wide and endless, silver under the moon. Whitecaps rose and fell like restless shoulders. And between each crash, she swore she heard it. A murmur, a phrase, a voice. Emily began to cry. It was sharp, panicked, her little body arching in the crib, her eyes fixed on the window, wide, terrified. She pointed a trembling finger toward the glass, her mouth opening in a scream. Sarah bent quickly, lifting her daughter into her arms. Shh, it's all right. Mommy's here. She rocked Emily, heart pounding against her ribs, but the child wouldn't stop. Her sobs only grew louder, her gaze locked on the dark square of glass as though something stood there. Sarah didn't dare look again. She pulled the curtains shut with one hand, clutching Emily close with the other. The fabric fluttered, then stilled. The room dimmed, but the whisper did not stop. It seeped into the walls, threading through the floorboards, slipping into the spaces between her breaths. She could almost make out the words now. Let her sleep, Let her dream. Let her go. Sarah pressed her lips against Emily's hair, whispering fiercely, "No one's taking you. Do you hear me? No one." The child clung tighter, her tears soaking Sarah's collar. Sarah began to hum again, but without words this time, only the tune. Even then, the whisper answered. And in its rhythm, Sarah thought she heard the sea laughing. Emily did not stop crying, even after Sarah closed the curtains tight, even after she rocked the little girl until her own arms ached. The sobs clawed at the walls of the small room. They were high, panicked sounds, not the ordinary cries of a tired child. These had an edge, like terror too deep for words. Sarah whispered, "It's just the move, sweetheart. You're just scared because everything's new." But even as she spoke, she didn't believe it. Because each time she thought of singing again, each time she let the first note rise in her throat, Emily shrieked louder, as though the song itself scalded her. Sarah tried silence. She sat in the creaking rocking chair by the crib, holding Emily close, humming only the faintest vibration in her chest. The child's sobs eased into hiccups, then into tired whimpers. Her lashes fluttered against her mother's collarbone. Relief loosened Sarah's spine. She pressed her lips to her daughter's hair, whispering, "That's it. Sleep now. Mommy's got you." But the relief lasted only seconds. Because under the hush of Emily's slowing breaths, Sarah heard it again, not inside her head, not from her own lips, from beyond the window. A low, lilting melody, the same lullaby. Her body went rigid. She knew Daniel was downstairs, half asleep on the sofa. No one else should be near. The nearest neighbor was half a mile down the coast. And yet, "Sleep, little one, sleep." The words were almost lost in the crash of surf. Almost. Her skin prickled with cold. She forced herself to glance toward the curtained window. The fabric swayed faintly, as if stirred by more than the draft. Emily whimpered again, her tiny fingers clutching Sarah's shirt. Sarah tightened her arms around her child. "It's just the wind," she whispered. "Only the wind." But the tune persisted, note for note, word for word, sung by no human throat she knew. She laid Emily gently back into the crib, hoping the child had finally succumbed to exhaustion. The girl's face was flushed, damp, her chest rising in uneven bursts. Sarah stepped quietly toward the window. Her heart hammered. Her hand trembled as she pinched the curtain's edge and pulled it back. The glass shone silver with moonlight. Beyond it stretched the ocean, black and infinite. Waves curled like claws, white foam shredding against the rocks below. Mist clung to the shoreline, rolling in thick, heavy sheets. And in the mist, a shape. At first she thought it was nothing more than the shadow of a tree, but there were no trees outside the house, only rocks and sand. The shape was slender, upright, like a figure standing still in the fog. Sarah's throat closed. She squinted, desperate to make sense of it. The figure did not move, but she felt it watching, even across the distance, even behind glass. The weight of its gaze pressed against her skin. Then, slowly, it lifted an arm. The hand was pale, skeletal. It pressed once against the window pane. Tap. Sarah stumbled back, gasping. The curtain fell closed again, the room darkening. Emily woke with a scream sharper than before, filled with raw panic. Her tiny hands grasped the air, pointing at the window, even through the curtain. No, Sarah stammered, rushing to scoop her up. "There's nothing there. You're safe, I promise." But the promise rang hollow. Her own skin still crawled with the memory of that pale hand. She rocked Emily desperately, whispering, "Mommy won't let anything happen. Not ever." The child's cries dulled into sobs, but her wide eyes stayed fixed on the curtain. Sarah held her until her own arms throbbed. She thought of calling Daniel upstairs, but something stopped her. What would she say? That she'd sung an old lullaby, and now there were voices in the sea? That their daughter screamed at shadows? Daniel would laugh. Or worse, worry about her instead of the child. He'd tell her she was overtired, imagining things. So she stayed silent, alone, listening. The house groaned around her, settling into the weight of night. The ocean murmured against the cliffs, and beneath it all, Sarah heard the voice again, closer now, pressed against the very walls. "Let her sleep. Let her dream." Emily whimpered, nestling against her mother's chest. Sarah clutched her tighter, heart slamming in rhythm with the waves. She whispered, fierce and trembling. "You can't have her. Do you hear me? She's mine." But the sea did not answer with silence. It answered with laughter. Sarah woke to the sound of waves. That was nothing new. The cottage stood so close to the cliff that the ocean seemed to live inside its walls. But tonight the rhythm was wrong. The crash and retreat, crash and retreat. It wasn't random anymore. It was steady, like breathing, like someone exhaling just outside her window. She sat up in bed, the sheets tangled around her legs, and listened. Daniel was still downstairs, snoring faintly on the sofa. Emily lay in the crib beside the bed, restless even in sleep. Her small fists twitched against her blanket, her lips murmuring soft sounds, half sobs carried over from the evening. Sarah touched her daughter's forehead. Warm, too warm. The air itself was heavy, damp. She drew her hand back and smelled her fingers. Salt. The house no longer smelled of dust and wood polish, as it had when they moved in. Now the air stank of brine, the metallic tang of fish, the sour rot of seaweed left too long in the Sunday. Sarah swallowed against the bile rising in her throat. She rose and padded barefoot to the window. Moonlight stretched across the floorboards, highlighting streaks that hadn't been there before. Pale trails, irregular, glittering faintly in the light. She knelt. Her fingertips came away gritty, damp. Salt. Crystallized veins of it, spreading from the sill across the wood like veins growing through a body. She jerked the curtain aside. The ocean sprawled below, restless under the moon, and from its surface, riding on the rhythm of the tide, came a whisper. Not just sound. Words. "Let her go, let her go." Sarah clapped a hand over her mouth, eyes wide. The voice wasn't hers. It wasn't in her head. It was the sea itself, rising with the tide, shaping its breath into a command. Emily whimpered. The sound sliced through Sarah's trance. She turned quickly, rushing to the crib. Her daughter's eyes were still closed, but her face twisted in fear. Her small chest heaved as though running from some nightmare. Sarah gathered her up, pressing her close. "Shh, Mommy's here. You're safe." But the moment she thought of singing, even just humming the tune, Emily writhed and wailed, her cries piercing the walls. Sarah bit down on her lip. "All right, no songs, I promise." No more songs. Still, the sea answered, a low, rising hum, like another mother crooning. The sound threaded through the house. It didn't come only from the ocean now. It seeped through the walls. It crept between the beams. The ceiling groaned like a chorus line holding its breath. Sarah staggered back, clutching Emily, her eyes darting wildly. The lamp on the dresser flickered. For a split second, shadows stretched across the wall, long, thin, finger-like shapes trailing downward, as though something outside pressed its hands against the house itself. And with every flicker came a phrase, deeper now, unmistakable. "Sleep, little one, sleep." Tears stung Sarah's eyes. She shook her head fiercely. "No, she's not yours." Her voice was too loud in the small room. It cracked, weak, compared to the vastness outside. Emily's cries reached a fever pitch. The girl's finger pointed toward the window again, trembling, accusing. Sarah forced herself to look. The glass reflected her own pale face, wide eyes, and behind it only the sea. But for a moment, she swore she saw another reflection. A woman's face, hair dripping with water, eyes hollow, filled not with pupils but with dark tide pools, and lips moving in perfect time with the song. Sarah ripped the curtains closed, stumbling backward until her shoulders struck the wall. Emily sobbed against her chest, and Sarah rocked her frantically. She whispered, "I won't sing. Do you hear me? I won't sing. Not ever again." But the house did not believe her, because the lullaby continued, softer now, sweet and coaxing, the way a tide pulls at the sand grain by grain. And beneath the sweetness, the words sharpened. Bring her, let her go." The floor creaked under her bare feet. She looked down. More salt streaks spread across the boards, spidering outward from the crib. They glittered faintly like veins of quartz, alive in the lamplight. The smell of brine thickened until she gagged. Emily's cries thinned into whimpers, her tiny body trembling against Sarah's chest. Sarah pressed her forehead to her daughter's, whispering through her tears, "I don't know what you want, but you can't have her. You can't." But even as she said it, the sea sang louder, and for the first time Sarah realized the lullaby wasn't meant to comfort. It was meant to summon. The house no longer slept. Every beam, every floorboard, seemed alive with sound. The lullaby threaded through the walls as if the entire cottage had become a throat, humming with the sea's song. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, clutching Emily tight. The child was pale with exhaustion, her cheeks wet, her tiny hands fisted against her mother's blouse. "Please," Sarah whispered into the darkness. "Please leave us alone." The sea answered, not with silence, with words. "Let her go." The voice rose from beyond the window, clear as if someone stood just outside. It was not the faint whisper of before. It was strong, resonant, a woman's voice, aged with salt and sorrow. Sarah's throat tightened. She turned toward the window despite herself. The curtains rippled. A draft swept the room, carrying the stench of brine, the sting of rot. Emily whimpered, then screamed. Her small body arched violently in Sarah's arms, as if pulled by invisible strings toward the window. "No." Sarah tightened her grip, stumbling backward. "She's mine. You can't have her." But the pull grew stronger. Emily's hair lifted, tugged by a wind that hadn't touched Sarah. Her tiny fingers clawed at the air, reaching toward the glass. The lullaby outside deepened into a chant. "Sleep, little one. Sleep. The tide is yours to keep." Sarah shook her head violently. "Stop it. Do you hear me? Stop." Her voice was raw, useless. It broke against the song like foam against rock. The curtains blew inward, though the window was closed. The lamp flickered once, then went out, plunging the room into moonlit gray. And in that light, the shadow appeared. It stood beyond the glass, a woman's shape, tall and thin, hair dripping across her shoulders as if she had just stepped from the sea. Her dress clung like kelp, shifting with the tide. But her face, her eyes were hollow, black sockets filled with moving water. The sea swirled inside them, endless, merciless. Her lips moved in time with the song, though no breath fogged the glass. Emily shrieked, her voice shredding into terror. She kicked against her mother's grip, fighting to reach the figure. Sarah staggered back until her spine struck the wall. "You can't have her," she cried, her own tears blinding her. The woman's hand lifted. It pressed flat against the glass. Drops of seawater bled through the pane, streaking down the inside of the window. The salt smell grew suffocating. The hand beckoned. Emily's screams shifted, no longer cries of fear, but longing, as though she knew the song, as though it belonged to her as much as to the sea. "No, baby," Sarah whispered fiercely, rocking her. "Don't listen. It's not for you." But the child's tiny voice, broken and trembling, echoed the tune. One note, clear, perfect. Sarah's blood ran cold. She clamped her hand over Emily's mouth, whispering, "No, don't sing. Don't ever sing." But the sea roared outside, waves crashing against the cliff, carrying the lullaby higher. The window rattled in its frame, glass trembling. The figure pressed harder, her mouth opening too wide, spilling black water down her chin. "Let her go. Let her go." Emily's body jerked violently, pulled toward the window with a force Sarah could barely resist. Her arms ached with the effort of holding her child back. Desperation burned Sarah's throat. She screamed, "Take me instead!" The song faltered. For one heartbeat, the figure froze. The voice stilled, the ocean pausing mid-breath. Then the woman's hollow eyes turned toward Sarah, and the whisper slid into her mind like a blade. "You are too old, too empty. The sea only takes what is still new." Sarah's knees buckled. Her back scraped the wall as she slid down, clutching Emily tighter, sobbing, "Please, she's mine. She's mine." The sea laughed. Low, rolling, endless. The window burst open. Salt wind screamed into the room. Curtains whipped like torn sails. Water sprayed across the walls, streaking them with white veins. The figure leaned inside, closer. Her hair spread across the floor like kelp reaching for prey. Her hands stretched, dripping brine, nails dark as shells. Emily was almost wrenched free. Sarah screamed, wrapping both arms around her daughter, anchoring herself to the bedpost. Her muscles burned, veins standing out in her neck. "You can't have her," she shrieked. The lullaby rose to a shrill peak, a harmony of dozens of voices beneath the woman's. The sea itself seemed to sing, the walls vibrating with it, and through it all, one command: let her go. Sarah shut her eyes tight. She pressed her face into Emily's hair, blocking out the salt wind, the song, the figure's hollow gaze. And through the pounding chaos, she whispered one word, over and over. No. Her voice broke. Her breath tore. But still she whispered, no, no, no. The song wavered. The figure's mouth widened into a silent scream. The ocean surged against the cliff, shaking the cottage to its foundation. And then, the lullaby cut off. Silence. The window slammed shut. The wind died. Sarah opened her eyes. The figure was gone, but the walls dripped with seawater. Salt veins glistened across the floorboards, and in the crib, where she had laid Emily hours before, a trail of wet sand spread across the mattress. The house was breathing. Salt dripped from the walls, veins of white crawling outward like frost. Emily whimpered against Sarah's chest, too weak now to cry. Her small body limped from exhaustion. Sarah staggered down the stairs, feet slipping on damp boards, the smell of brine suffocating. The sea had entered the house. It would not let go. Her only thought was to get out, away from the walls that sang. The front door resisted her first pull. Swollen wood, rusted hinges, but with a sobbing scream, she tore it open. The night air rushed in, heavy with fog and the roar of surf. She bolted down the path, bare feet scraping gravel, clutching Emily so tightly the girl's breath wheezed. The wind whipped her hair across her face, the mist soaking her clothes in seconds. The song followed her, not from behind, from ahead, from the sea. The cliffs opened onto the narrow strip of beach. Moonlight bled through the mist, silvering the wet sand. Waves surged and collapsed with violent hunger. Each crash a voice, each retreat a whisper. Let her go. Sarah stumbled onto the shore, knees buckling as the tide licked at her ankles. Emily stirred, a faint cry breaking from her lips, as though in answer. Sarah pressed her close, whispering fiercely, "No, baby, don't listen. Don't you dare listen." But the sea sang louder. Something dark rolled in the surf. At first she thought it was driftwood, but as the tide receded, it left behind the shape of a book, thick, bound in leather gone black with rot. The cover swollen, warped. Seaweed clung to its spine. Barnacles crusted its corners. It lay half buried in the sand, as if the sea had chosen to give it to her. Sarah hesitated, chest heaving. Then, with trembling fingers, she reached for it. The leather was slimy, cold. She pulled it free. The book opened too easily, the swollen pages parting like gills. Ink bled and blurred, but the words still lived, scrawled in an old hand, jagged and desperate. The covenant must be kept. The sea takes what is hers, one child for every generation, lest the tide rise and swallow all. Sarah's stomach lurched. She turned page after page, her tears blurring the script. They sang to keep it calm. They sang to offer what was owed. Their lullabies were not for sleep, but for surrender. Her hands shook violently. She nearly dropped the book into the tide. Emily whimpered again, and Sarah looked down at her daughter's face, pale, small. Her lashes fluttered, as though she heard the song even in dreams. "No," Sarah whispered. "You don't belong to it. You belong to me." But the sea answered, louder now, the waves crashing higher, almost gleeful. "Bring her, bring her." The mist thickened. Shadows writhed within it. Shapes of children, pale and dripping, their eyes hollow. They stood knee-deep in the surf, watching her silently. And behind them, taller, the woman with hair of kelp and eyes of tide. Her mouth moved, and the voice of the sea poured out. The covenant must be kept. Sarah clutched Emily tighter, backing away until the tide soaked her dress. "No, I won't give her to you." The book throbbed in her hand, the leather warm now, pulsing faintly like flesh. The ink shifted across the page, forming new words before her eyes. "It is already written. The sea does not forget." Sarah screamed and hurled the book into the waves. It vanished instantly, swallowed whole, but the whisper did not stop. It rose higher, until the mist itself seemed to chant, "Let her go. Let her go. Let her go." The tide surged suddenly, slamming against her shins with enough force to nearly topple her. Emily slipped in her grasp, almost dragged downward by the pull of the water. Sarah fell to her knees in the surf, clutching her daughter above her head, Take me instead, she sobbed. If you need someone, take me. The sea laughed. Too old, too empty, too late. The voices of the children echoed it, hollow and sweet. Too late, too late. The water rose higher, cold and merciless. Sarah staggered to her feet, dragging Emily back toward the rocks. But when she turned, the path was gone. Mist had swallowed it. Only water stretched behind her, lapping at her heels. She spun wildly. The sea was everywhere. Above, below, around. The cliff had vanished. The beach erased. She stood on a strip of sand no wider than her body, the tide rising on all sides, and the lullaby filled the air, louder than ever. Emily stirred again. Her small lips moved. She whispered a single word, clear and soft, though Sarah knew her daughter could not possibly have learned it. Mama. Sarah's heart broke. She pressed a kiss to her child's damp hair, rocking her even as the tide rose to her waist. I won't let them take you, she vowed, even if it kills me. The sea answered with silence. Then with one final whisper, low and certain, the sea always takes what it is owed. When Daniel awoke the next morning, the house was empty. The crib still damp with salt, the floor streaked with veins of white. Out on the beach, he found only a trail of small footprints leading into the surf. And there, half buried in sand, a single page from a ruined book. The ink still legible, though wet. They sang not to soothe, but to summon. The lullaby is a key. Once sung, the sea will come. Epilogue. Sometimes, late at night, when the tide is high and the wind drags its nails across the rocks, neighbors swear they hear a song, faint, lulling, a mother's voice, and beneath it the laughter of a child, both carried out to sea. The last selfie. Midnight has a way of making the city look hollow. The streets gleam like veins under dim yellow lamps, every puddle reflecting a warped piece of the sky. Jake had walked these streets countless times, camera slung across his chest, chasing fragments of light and shadow. But tonight, the weight on his shoulder wasn't his DSLR. It was nothing more than an old paper bag, the kind a thrift shop might hand you with something fragile inside. Inside that bag sat the phone. It wasn't even a smartphone by modern standards. The clerk had called it a relic, chuckling as if selling nostalgia instead of technology. But something about it had pulled at Jake the scratched glass, the faint smell of ozone when he held it. An object with history. And Jake, in his own quiet way, liked things with history. Jake was 28, a photographer by passion, freelancer by necessity. He took odd jobs, headshots, events, even wedding gigs when rent demanded. But his true obsession had always been the self-portrait, not selfies in the casual sense, though that's what people called them when they teased him. For Jake, every self-portrait was a study. Angles, light, expression, the shifting mask of the self. He had folders upon folders on his computer labeled by month, then by week, then by day. Faces of himself, hundreds, thousands. Yet despite all those photos, Jake never felt he'd captured something true. Always an inch away from honesty. Always something missing. So when he saw the phone in that cramped antique shop, its cracked casing and faint glimmer of potential, he bought it without hesitation. $50, no charger included. Back in his apartment, he found an old cord that fit. He plugged the device into the wall, the screen flickering uncertainly before coming to life. It was slow, clunky, but it worked. Jake swiped through the menus, curiosity nibbling at him. Most of the folders were empty, the memory wiped clean, but one remained. Photos. His thumb hesitated, then tapped. The gallery opened. There was only one image. It was a selfie. A girl, maybe 19 or 20, hair falling in loose strands around her face. She smiled at the camera, or tried to. The smile was uneven, brittle, as though someone had told her to smile at the last second. But her face was wrong, not in the way of blur or bad focus. Wrong in the way of distortion. The features smudged, melting like wet paint. Her eyes were there, her mouth, her skin, but none of it seemed fixed in place. And behind her, a shadow. Not a person, not exactly. Just the outline of something tall, hunched, leaning close, too close. Jake felt his stomach lurch. His thumb hovered over the screen, trembling. Then he noticed the timestamp. The photo was dated tomorrow. Tomorrow, 11:59 p.m. Jake's throat tightened. He blinked hard, refreshing the info tab, but the number stayed. Clear. Definite. It wasn't possible. The phone wasn't even connected to a network. And yet, there it was. A selfie taken tomorrow night. Of someone who wasn't him. For a long time, Jake sat motionless on the edge of his bed, the glow of the screen carving lines across his face. The girl's blurred smile seemed to waver, as if her lips shifted slightly each time he looked back. The shadow behind her loomed larger than logic allowed. He locked the phone, placed it face down on the desk. But long after, as he lay in the dark, Jake swore he could feel its screen warming the room, as if the photo wasn't trapped inside the phone, as if it were watching him. The phone would not leave his mind. Jake woke late the next morning, though woke was too generous a word. He had drifted in and out of shallow dreams all night, the kind where shadows pressed against the edge of vision and never stepped into light. When he opened his eyes, his first thought wasn't of breakfast or rent or work. It was of the photo. He reached for the phone before he even sat up. The screen flared to life, weak but eager, like an old candle catching flame. His thumb swiped, muscle memory already betraying him. There she was again, the girl, her face blurred, her lips trembling into something that was almost a smile, almost a grimace, and always, that shadow behind her. Too tall, too close. Jake stared until his vision swam. The timestamp still read, tomorrow. He told himself it was a glitch, some weird leftover from the phone's corrupted memory, a bad edit, a hoax. But when he opened the info tab, the date glared back at him, crisp and impossible. Tomorrow, 11:59 p.m. He locked the phone again, tossed it aside, tried to brew coffee, scroll the news, edit old photos on his computer, but each time his eyes slipped toward the desk, he swore the screen pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. By evening, Jake gave in. He sat at the desk, turned the phone toward himself. If it's just a glitch, he muttered, then prove it. His reflection swam across the black glass. Pale face, messy hair, eyes ringed by sleeplessness. Nothing unusual. He tapped the camera. The lens opened. Jake lifted the phone, angled it toward himself, thumb hovering over the shutter. Just another photo, he whispered. The screen froze as the shutter clicked. And when the image loaded, Jake's stomach lurched. It was his face, but not his. The lines blurred, smudged, melting like wax under heat. His eyes were hazy, slipping out of focus no matter how much he squinted, and there faint, but certain the curve of another face behind him. Her face, the girl's, she was closer this time, her blurred smile brushing the edge of his cheek, as though she leaned into the frame with him. Jake dropped the phone onto the desk. The thud echoed too loud in the apartment's silence. His chest heaved. His hands shook. He whispered into the stillness, "What the hell is this?" And then he heard it, soft, behind his ear. The words weren't loud. They weren't even clear. But they were there, threading into his bones, vibrating against the air. Jake whipped around. The apartment was empty. The radiator hissed faintly. The fridge hummed. No one stood behind him. He forced himself to laugh, but it came out cracked, hollow. Stress, that's all. Yet even as he tried to shake it off, the phone chimed. He froze. The screen was awake again, though he hadn't touched it. The camera app open, the lens unblinking, waiting. And then, without his hand on the button, the shutter clicked. A new photo appeared. Jake, sitting at the desk, mouth open in shock. And there, clear as glass now, the girl's blurred figure perched on his shoulder, her smile stretched too wide. Jake stumbled back, knocking over the chair. The phone slid across the desk but did not fall. The image glowed, mocking, undeniable. His ears rang with the whisper again. This time it was lower, closer, as if spoken directly into his throat. Jake clutched his head, gasping. No, I won't. The camera clicked again, without his touch. Another photo appeared. Jake, hunched, hands clamped over his ears, and the girl, blurred but grinning, crouched just behind him. That night, he did not sleep. He shoved the phone into a drawer, wrapped it in an old t-shirt, buried it beneath stacks of books. But still the shudder echoed in his dreams. Still the whisper followed him into darkness. And when he woke, the phone lay beside him on the pillow, its cold glass pressed against his cheek. Screen glowing. Camera open. Waiting. Jake no longer trusted the dark. It wasn't night itself. The city had always carried shadows. But now, every patch of blackness seemed capable of birthing a face. Every mirror, every reflective surface, felt like an invitation for her to appear. And the phone never slept. On the third night, Jake woke to the sound of a shutter. Sharp, metallic, the sound of capture. He sat bolt upright, chest hammering. The room was dim, only the orange wash of the street lamp leaking through blinds. His phone lay on the nightstand, screen aglow. The gallery app was open. New photos waited. His fingers trembled as he scrolled. The first showed him sleeping, mouth slightly open, sheets tangled around his waist. His chest rose mid-breath. In the corner of the frame, blurred, the curve of hair, a shoulder, the girl. The next photo she was closer, her smile faint, lips pressed like someone suppressing laughter. The third, her face nearly touched his. Eyes blurred, features smeared but there, undeniably there. And the fourth stole the breath from his lungs. A hand rested on his chest, pale, delicate, dripping pixels like water. His own body in the image seemed to shiver beneath it. Jake hurled the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a crack, fell to the floor. For one blissful second, silence. Then the screen blinked back on. Camera open. Waiting. He backed against the headboard, clutching his knees, whispering, "Stop, just stop." But the shutter clicked again. From across the room, a new photo appeared. Jake on the bed, eyes wide, mouth forming the word stop. And behind him, the shadow. Not blurred this time. Clear. Towering. Its shape was human, but wrong. The limbs too long. The posture bent as though it crawled just out of frame. Its head tilted, almost curious. And beside it, the girl, still smiling. Jake refused to pick the phone up. He left it glowing on the floor, face turned toward the ceiling, but the light stretched across the walls, filling every corner with its pale glow, like a second moon that refused to set. The whisper came again. "Hãy chụp ảnh cho tôi." It wasn't in the phone this time. It was in the room. Jake's breath hitched. "No," he croaked. "I won't." The whisper grew sharper. "Chụp cho tôi." The air thickened. The walls seemed to bend inward. His own reflection shimmered faintly in the black screen, though he wasn't touching it. And then, another click. By morning, Jake's body ached from the way he'd curled into himself on the bed, refusing to move. The phone sat neatly on the nightstand again. Screen off. Still, he didn't remember putting it there. He didn't remember touching it. But the gallery now held dozens of new images. Some showed him pacing the apartment. Some showed him eating cereal at the kitchen counter, though he hadn't eaten in 2 days. And some showed him standing at the window, his back to the camera, while the girl's blurred smile hovered in the glass reflection. He scrolled faster, heart pounding. The last image stopped him cold. It was a selfie, but he hadn't taken it. In it, Jake stared directly into the lens, eyes glassy, lips parted in a half-smile he did not recognize. And the girl was pressed against him, cheek to cheek, her blurred features almost merging with his. Jake slammed the phone shut, dropped it into the sink, and turned on the tap. Water roared, icy, drowning the device. He stood there, shaking, watching bubbles rise from the cracks. For a moment, he thought it might work. The screen went black. The hiss of static died. But then, through the rushing water, click, the phone lit again. Beneath the stream, its camera lens unblinking, glowing green like an open eye. Jake staggered back, clutching his head. The whisper chased him into the hall. "Chụp ảnh cho tôi, để tôi hiện rõ hơn." By nightfall, he gave up resisting. He set the phone on the table, sat across from it staring. "If I take another," he whispered. "Will you stop?" Silence. Then, faintly, like breath fogging glass, "Một lần nữa thôi." Jake's hand trembled as he lifted the phone. The camera app was already open. He angled it toward himself. The screen showed his pale face, ringed by exhaustion, and over his shoulder, blurred but undeniable, the girl, smiling, closer than ever. Jake's thumb hovered. The shutter clicked. The photo appeared. This time, her face was almost clear. The blur had lifted, features sharp enough to recognize. Wide eyes, thin lips curved into a smile that never reached them, and the shadow behind them both leaned closer, its hand poised above Jake's head. He dropped the phone with a cry, but the whisper filled the room, triumphant. Gunzoy. Zip Gunzoy. Jake had stopped sleeping. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, hadn't left the apartment. The blinds stayed closed, the lights left off. His only illumination came from the phone, that endless glow of glass and pixel. The gallery was full now, hundreds of images, Jake in every angle imaginable, smiling when he hadn't smiled, sleeping when he hadn't slept, standing in the kitchen at times he had never left his desk. And always, the girl, her blurred face sharpening with each new photo, as though each click pulled her into focus, until finally she was clear. She looked young, 19, maybe 20, eyes too wide, dark, hollow at the edges, lips stretched into a smile that was almost human, but not quite. And behind her, the shadow, no longer vague. It loomed like a figure painted in tar, limbs too long, posture bent in mockery of human form, its head tilted, watching Jake as though waiting for permission. Jake stared until tears blurred his vision. "Why me?" he whispered. "What do you want?" The answer slid through the air like static. "Hãy chụp ảnh cho tôi." That night, Jake tried to destroy it. He hurled the phone against the wall. The glass shattered, shards scattering across the floor, but the screen lit anyway, cracks glowing like veins of fire. The camera opened itself, and then the shutter clicked. Jake stumbled back. "No, stop." But the phone vibrated violently, rattling against the floorboards. A hum rose from it, deep, electronic, like wires buzzing with too much current. The gallery app launched by itself. A new photo appeared. Jake, mid-scream, caught in perfect detail. And behind him, the girl, now crystal clear. Her eyes locked on his, her smile wide enough to split skin. The photo shimmered, and then Jake felt it. The floor shifted beneath him. Not the floor, the world. The air pulled, like gravity had reversed, centered not in the earth but in the small glowing rectangle at his feet. His chest heaved, his hair whipped toward it, his fingertips tingled with static. "No," he gasped. "No, no, no." The pull grew stronger. His knees buckled, his body bent forward, unwilling, dragged toward the shattered screen. Jake clawed at the desk, the chair, anything. Splinters cut into his palms, but his grip broke, fingers slipping as though slick with oil. The phone pulsed like a beating heart, and then fell. Not onto the floor, not into the wall, but through the phone. The world blinked black. When Jake opened his eyes, he was standing on nothing. White, an endless horizon of it. Floor, ceiling, walls, if such things existed here, were all the same blank shade. It was like standing inside an overexposed photograph, every edge erased, every shadow consumed. Jake turned in frantic circles, his breath echoing in the vast emptiness. His own footsteps made no sound. "Hello?" His voice cracked. "Is anyone?" A shutter clicked. The sound ricocheted across the whiteness. Infinite. Jake spun, and she was there. The girl, no longer blurred. She stood only a few feet away, hair falling damp around her face, eyes dark and sharp. Her smile stretched across her face like it had always belonged there. She tilted her head. Finally, she whispered. Her voice was both distant and inside his skull. Jake stumbled back, but the whiteness offered no distance. The space folded strangely, every step bringing him no farther away. "What do you want from me?" he demanded. The girl's smile deepened. "I told you," she said softly. "A picture." The phone appeared in his hand. He hadn't picked it up. He hadn't even realized it was there until the weight dragged his wrist down. Its screen glowed, camera already open. Jake's reflection filled the lens, pale, trembling, eyes wide with fear, and beside him, the girl leaned closer, her smile stretching too wide, teeth too white. The shutter clicked. The sound didn't come from the phone. It came from the air itself, from the whiteness, from everywhere. The photo floated into existence, hanging in the void. Jake stared at himself, caught mid-panic. The girl pressed against him. Another click. Another photo appeared. And another. Dozens, hundreds, filling the air around him, suspended like mirrors. Each one showed him in different poses, different expressions. Some laughing, some crying, some staring blankly into the lens. All of them with her. Always her. Jake dropped the phone. It dissolved into the floor, leaving only the endless white. "Let me go," he begged, voice cracking. "Please, let me go." The girl's eyes glittered. She stepped closer until her face was inches from his. "You don't understand," she whispered. "There is no leaving." Her smile widened, splitting like a tear across her face. "This is the frame now, and we are in it together." Jake screamed. The whiteness swallowed the sound. The photos multiplied, surrounding him on all sides, each one a fragment of him that didn't belong to him anymore. And in every single one, the girl's blurred hand rested on his shoulder. The void was infinite, and yet, no matter how far Jake ran, he never moved. The whiteness bent itself around him like glass, trapping him in a frame. His breath came in ragged bursts, his throat raw from screaming. Everywhere he turned, photos floated in the air, thousands of them now, each one a fragment of his face, each one catching a moment that had never happened. In some, he smiled. In others, he sobbed. Some showed him standing still, eyes hollow as though he had been waiting all his life. And always, always, the girl stood beside him, her blurred hand resting on his shoulder. Jake pressed his palms to his head. "This isn't real," he shouted. "It's not." The shutter clicked. A new photo appeared midair, freezing him mid-protest. Mouth wide, eyes wild, his body convulsed with terror. "Stop." Click. Jake screaming, face twisted, caught in stillness. "Please, I don't want this." Click. Jake begging, hands outstretched toward the lens. Every sound became image. Every breath became proof. Jake spun, clutching the air. "Why me?" The girl's laugh was soft, almost kind. "Because you looked." She stepped closer, her bare feet making no sound against the white floor. "Because you chose to hold the frame. You pressed the shutter. And once you press," her smile widened, impossibly wide. "You belong to it." Jake dropped to his knees. His chest heaved, lungs scraping as though the air itself cut. "I'll destroy it," he whispered. "I'll find a way." The girl crouched in front of him. Her blurred edges shimmered like heat haze, but her eyes were sharp, empty. "You can't destroy what you are inside of," she said. The shadow loomed behind her now, darker than the void, its limbs bending into the shape of a lens. It tilted forward, framing him, the edges of its body closing in like shutters. Jake screamed. Click. A photo appeared. Jake kneeling, tears streaking his face. He bolted upward, running, though the whiteness folded around him like a maze. His legs ached, but the distance never changed. Behind him, the clicks multiplied. Dozens, hundreds, shutters firing with mechanical hunger. Photos swarmed him, brushing against his skin like paper moths, each one cold, each one whispering faint echoes of his own voice. "Please, stop. I don't want. Please." Jake tore at them with his hands, but the images didn't tear. They clung, wrapping his arms, plastering to his face. His own eyes stared back from every angle, and over each shoulder, the girl, smiling. "Let me out," he roared. Click. The final photo appeared. Jake's mouth stretched wide in a scream, his eyes bloodshot, veins bulging at his temples. The girl pressed cheek to cheek against him, smiling serenely. The image shimmered, brighter than the rest. Then it sank, folding inward, flattening until only one remained. A single photo, a selfie. The void blinked black. When the light returned, the phone lay silent on the counter of the antique shop, its screen dark, cracked lines like a spider web. Behind the counter, the shopkeeper shuffled in, yawning. He reached for the device absent-mindedly, brushing dust from its surface. The screen lit. The gallery opened. There it was, the newest image. Jake, screaming. The girl smiling. The timestamp, 11:59 p.m. The shopkeeper studied it for a moment, his lips curling faintly. Then he placed the phone back on the shelf among radios, cameras, clocks, waiting. That night, the street outside the shop was quiet. Only the neon sign flickered, throwing pale light across the glass. And if anyone passed by, they might have sworn the phone's cracked screen glowed faintly, and from somewhere inside it, a voice whispered, "Take a picture for me. The house on the hill. Some houses don't just shelter you, they listen. And if you're not careful," they answered. The house on the hill had been empty for years. That's what the woman at the diner said when Paul signed the papers. She'd leaned across the counter, lowering her voice as though afraid the coffee mugs might overhear. "No one stays up there," she warned. "Not for long. Some folks say the walls don't keep sound in. They let sound out." Paul had smiled politely, nodding the way you do when you want a conversation to end. Anne had laughed, brushing the comment aside like a cobweb. Ghost stories belong to the town, not to them. And yet, when the moving truck pulled away, when dusk fell heavy and the last box was dragged inside, both of them stood in the foyer, staring upward at the high-beamed ceiling. The silence was immense. It pressed against their ears, thicker than quiet should be. The house was old, older than its whitewashed paint and creaking porch suggested, built of stone at its bones, wood at its skin. The walls breathed faint drafts that carried the smell of soil and damp, as though the hill itself had roots that curled into the rooms. Anne touched the banister with her fingertips. Dust clung instantly, smearing into her palm. "Charming," she said with a small smile. Paul grinned, though his jaw tightened. "It's ours." They spent hours unpacking, plates stacked into cupboards that still smelled faintly of varnish, clothes hung in closets that whispered of mothballs and cedar. Each step stirred echoes. By the time the sun had bled itself into the horizon, the house seemed to sigh with them, exhaling the day into shadow. Dinner was takeout cartons on the kitchen counter. Paul cracked open a beer. Anne sipped wine from a chipped glass. They clinked them together with weary smiles. "To new beginnings," Paul said. "To our house." Anne answered. The words tasted brave, but when they carried their glasses upstairs, the floorboards groaned, long and low, like something shifting in its sleep. Their bedroom faced the slope of the hill, window wide enough to frame the moon. Anne slipped beneath the covers first, curling into the comfort of blankets that smelled faintly of cardboard and dust. Paul followed, draping an arm over her waist. "It's too quiet," Anne whispered. Paul kissed the back of her shoulder. "Better than traffic." She tried to agree, tried to let exhaustion take her, but the silence wasn't empty. It was waiting. Sometime past midnight, Anne stirred. Her eyes opened to darkness, the moonlight silver across the floor. The air was cool, carrying the faint creak of beams settling. Then she heard it, a sound so faint she thought it might be her own breath at first. A murmur, words, whispering. Anne lifted her head, pulse quickening. "Paul," she whispered. His breath was deep, even, asleep. The whisper continued, low, steady, as though someone spoke just beyond the wall. Anne sat up, heart thudding. She strained her ears. The words were indistinct, slippery as water, but they carried a cadence, a rhythm, not wind, not pipes, a voice, alone, never alone. The hairs on her arms rose. She swung her legs over the bed, bare feet finding the cool wood floor. The whisper seemed to slide with her, shifting to follow her movement. She pressed a palm to the wall. It was warm. Anne snatched her hand back. Her breath caught. The whisper swelled, faintly amused. "Listen. Hear us." Anne stumbled back toward the bed. She shook Paul's shoulder, voice trembling. "Wake up, Paul, please." He stirred, groaning. "What is it?" "The wall," she hissed. There's something in the wall." Paul rubbed his eyes, blinking blearily. He pressed his ear against the plaster. Silence. Only silence. He turned, half smiling. Just the house settling. Old wood, old stone. "Don't scare yourself." Anne wanted to believe him. She lay back down, pulling the blanket high beneath her chin. But long after Paul's breathing steadied again, she kept her eyes open, because the house was not silent. It was whispering. And now, she was certain it whispered her name. The next day, sunlight spilled across the bedroom like a false promise. Anne brewed coffee in the old percolator, listening to it hiss and bubble. Paul flipped through boxes, unpacking his camera equipment, muttering about missing cables. For a while, the house seemed ordinary. Dusty, creaky, but ordinary. Anne almost convinced herself she'd imagined the night before. Almost. But when she reached for a mug in the cabinet, her fingers brushed the wood, and a faint vibration tingled up her arm. She froze, heart tripping. It felt like the after-echo of a voice. She set the mug down carefully. The day passed in work. Paul hammered nails. Anne arranged books on shelves. They ate sandwiches at the counter. dust motes dancing in the sunlight. And yet, by dusk, the air felt heavier, as if the walls themselves had inhaled too deeply and forgotten how to let go. When the sun sank behind the hill, shadows pooled thick in the corners. The silence returned, the waiting. That night, Anne didn't fall asleep easily. She lay awake, eyes tracing the ceiling beams. Paul's breathing steadied beside her. Then, the whisper, faint at first, sliding between the boards. Don't trust him. Anne sat bolt upright. Her heart clattered against her ribs. She turned toward Paul, shaking his shoulder. He groaned, rolling to face her. Again? Listen, she whispered fiercely. Just listen. For a moment, only silence. Then softly, as if leaning close to Paul's ear, she doesn't love you. She never did. Paul froze. His eyes widened in the moonlight. You heard that, Anne whispered. He sat up, frowning. It's pipes. Old houses make noise. But his voice lacked conviction, because the wall was warm again, heat pulsing faintly against the night. The whispers grew bolder. Night after night, their words sharpened. Argue, fight, let it out. You don't belong together. She lies. He lies. The voices didn't just speak. They provoked. Paul began to snap more easily. A misplaced glass, an unopened box, a careless remark, all kindling for arguments. Anne responded in kind, her nerves frayed by sleepless nights. The house fed on it. Every raised voice echoed too loud, bouncing back from the walls as if applauded. One evening, after a long day of unpacking, Anne dropped a stack of plates. They shattered across the kitchen floor, shards glittering like frost. Paul stormed in, face tight. Could you be more careful? Anne bristled. It was an accident. You're always so clumsy, he snapped. Her hands clenched. And you're always so perfect. Their voices rose, sharp and cutting, and as they argued, the kitchen air shifted. The walls grew warm, almost hot. The floor thrummed faintly beneath their feet, as if pleased, and through the rising heat, a chorus of whispers urged them on. Yes, louder. Break it. Break each other. Anne staggered back, chest heaving. Do you hear it? They want us to fight. Paul's face was pale, sweat beading his brow. Shut up, he muttered. No, listen. I said shut up. The words burst from him, raw and unfamiliar. Silence followed. The house seemed to sigh, satisfied. The walls cooled, but neither of them could meet the other's eyes. Later that night, Anne sat alone in the hallway, head in her hands. The wallpaper felt damp beneath her back, as though the house exhaled against her. From somewhere deep inside the walls, the whispers returned. Not faint now, not hidden. Hate him. Let it rot. Hate her. Make it end. She pressed her palms to her ears, tears leaking between her fingers, but the words slithered in anyway, curling inside her mind like smoke. And in the bedroom, Paul stared at the ceiling, fists clenched, hearing the same poison. Neither of them slept. The house didn't want them to. It wanted them raw. It wanted them broken. And each time their eyes closed, it whispered new words into the cracks between them. Words that would not be forgotten by morning. The whispers had done their work. Nights blurred into arguments, mornings into silences. Paul and Anne moved through the house like strangers, each carrying words they hadn't meant to say but couldn't forget. And the house listened. It always listened. It began with the air. Anne was in the living room, folding blankets, when Paul stormed in after failing to fix the water heater. His voice was sharp, accusing. You never remind me about these things until it's broken. Anne's jaw tightened. I'm not your secretary, Paul. Heat swelled suddenly, heavy and stifling. The air thickened, pressing against her lungs. The walls glowed faintly, the paint shimmering like metal under a torch. Anne dropped the blanket, gasping. Do you feel that? Paul wiped sweat from his forehead, startled. The thermostat was off, the windows open, but the house pulsed with fever, and when their voices dropped, the heat ebbed. Another night, it was the opposite. They lay in bed, backs turned. The silence between them weighed more than any argument. Anne whispered, Do you even want to be here with me? Paul's breath caught. The air shifted. Cold slithered down the walls, cooling across the floor. Frost feathered along the window panes, though outside the night was warm. Anne's teeth chattered. Her breath rose in pale mist. Paul reached for her hand beneath the blanket, desperate for warmth, but her fingers recoiled. The cold deepened, cruel and sharp, until the floorboards themselves cracked. And in that freezing silence, the whisper came again. Afraid. Yes, cold still. It escalated quickly. One evening, during another fight, this one over money, or maybe the groceries, neither could recall, the house moved. A glass toppled from the counter, shattering at Anne's feet. The cabinet doors rattled, hinges shrieking. The overhead light flickered, buzzing, then popped, showering sparks. Paul grabbed Anne's arm. We need to leave. But the front door slammed shut on its own. The walls thrummed like a heartbeat. Stay and feed us. Objects grew restless after that. Chairs slid inches across the floor when tempers rose. Mirrors quivered on the walls, their reflections warping. Once, during a bitter argument at the dining table, the chandelier above them swayed violently, though no wind stirred. Dust rained down, peppering their untouched plates. Anne whispered, horrified, "It's reacting to us." Paul's face was pale. "No, we're imagining it. We have to be." But even as he spoke, the walls flushed red with heat. And Anne knew the house was not imagining anything. Fear became as dangerous as anger. When Anne tiptoed through the hallway at night, trying to avoid waking Paul, the shadows thickened, swallowing the edges of the walls. A low groan vibrated through the floorboards, rattling the pictures on the wall. The colder her fear, the colder the air became. Once, she found frost crawling up the banister beneath her palm, biting into her skin until it blistered. She pulled her hand away, trembling, and from deep inside the wood came the faintest laugh. Paul experienced it too. One morning, while shaving in the upstairs bathroom, he remembered Anne's words from the night before. "You never listen. You never care." Anger flared in his chest. The mirror before him clouded instantly with heat, the glass warping. He staggered back, watching his reflection ripple like water. For one dizzying moment, another face blinked back at him, not his own. A face twisted, stretched, smiling too wide. Paul stumbled from the room, breath ragged. The whisper followed him down the hall. "Yes, louder. We are hungry." By now, neither of them denied it. The house wasn't haunted. It was alive. Every emotion they spilled became its nourishment. Every word sharpened its hunger. Anne pressed her hands to her ears one night, sobbing. "We have to stop. We have to stop fighting." Paul clutched her shoulders, whispering, "I know, but it won't let us." The walls pulsed warm, pleased. The floor thrummed in agreement, and the whispers twined together, overlapping like a choir of serpents. "Don't stop. Never stop. You are ours." It began with a decision. Anne stood at the kitchen table, suitcase open, her hands shaking as she stuffed clothes inside. Paul leaned against the doorway, pale and hollow-eyed. "I can't," Anne whispered. "I can't stay here one more night." Paul nodded slowly. "Then we go. Tonight. Before it knows." But the house was always listening. They crept through the hall together, bags in hand. The air felt thick, watching. Each footstep on the old wood echoed too loud, as though repeated back by a mouth too wide. At the front door, Paul reached for the knob. His fingers curled. Turn. Nothing. The knob didn't budge. He pulled harder. The brass burned under his grip, growing hot. Anne dropped her bag. "Paul," the door groaned, the wood flexing as though alive. Then it slammed back against the frame with a thunderous crack. Locked. They stumbled toward the windows. Anne grabbed the latch of the living room sash, shoving upward. It rattled in place, unmoving. Frost feathered instantly across the glass, spreading in jagged veins. Her breath clouded as she gasped, pulling her hands back. Her fingertips blistered white with cold. The glass pulsed, humming faintly like a throat. Paul struck it with his fist. The pane shuddered but did not break. Instead, the reflection warped, twisting his face into something unrecognizable. A grin stretched across his mirrored image, though his real mouth stayed clenched. Anna screamed. The house shuddered. Walls groaned, beams cracking. The floor vibrated beneath their feet, steady and deep, like a heartbeat rising from the hill itself. The whispers poured from every direction, no longer subtle. "Stay, stay, stay." They ran for the back door. It slammed shut before they reached it. Paul's fists pounded the wood until blood smeared the panels. The door pulsed warm against his knuckles. as though it enjoyed the taste. Anne clutched his arm. It's not going to let us leave. The air grew hotter. Paint bubbled on the walls. The chandelier swayed violently, dust falling like ash. Anne staggered back as the kitchen tiles beneath her feet turned slick, sweat rising through the grout like water from a spring. Then, just as suddenly, the heat dropped. A cold draft swept in, sharp and cruel. Frost crawled along the counters, up the walls, encasing everything in brittle ice. The rapid shifts made their bones ache, their skin sting. The house was playing with them. Paul grabbed Anne's hand, dragging her toward the stairs. The attic, maybe a window, but as they mounted the first steps, the staircase groaned, then lurched. The boards shifted beneath them like a muscle flexing. Anne cried out, clutching the rail. It writhed in her hand, warm and pulsing like a vein. The steps pitched sideways, throwing Paul against the wall. The wallpaper split, seams tearing open like wounds. From inside came a low hiss, wet and eager. "Don't go. You are ours." They stumbled back down, collapsing against each other in the hall. Anne's tears streaked hot against her cheeks. "It won't let us go. We're trapped." Paul held her tight, chest heaving. "Then we fight it." But the house laughed. Not a whisper this time, a laugh. It rose from the floors, rattled through the beams, shook dust from the ceiling. A laugh that rolled through the walls like thunder, mocking, merciless. "Yes, fight. Feed us more." The floorboards shifted, pushing upward. The hallway narrowed, walls inching closer. Anne gasped, clutching Paul's shirt. "It's closing in." The plaster cracked, dust choking the air. The ceiling bowed low, beams creaking, as though the house itself bent to swallow them. Paul shoved at the wall, his palms scraping against warm plaster that beat beneath his touch. The walls pulsed in answer, contracting tighter. The house was breathing, and they were trapped in its lungs. They ran from room to room, but each door slammed, each window sealed. The whispers followed, rising into a chant. "Never alone. Never alone. Stay. Stay." Anne collapsed against the dining room table, sobbing. "What does it want from us?" The walls answered, their voices merging into one. "Everything." The chandelier above exploded, shards raining down like teeth. Paul shielded Anne, both of them huddled together as the house exhaled a wave of scalding heat, then froze it into shards of ice. They couldn't fight it, they couldn't flee, and the house knew it. At last, they stumbled back into the foyer, cornered. The front door loomed before them, still sealed. The house fell silent, for one terrible moment, silence heavier than any scream. Then the walls shuddered, leaning inward, closing. The house's voice filled the air, a chorus that seemed to come from every nail, every beam, every brick. "Don't worry, you'll never be alone again." The foyer was shrinking. The walls leaned inward, plaster cracking, beams splintering, as though the house itself was folding around them. Dust fell in choking curtains. Paul clutched Anne against him. His arms trembled, but he held fast. "Stay with me. Whatever happens, stay with me." Anne's eyes glistened, wide and unblinking. "It doesn't want us apart. It wants us together." The house groaned in approval. "Yes, together. Forever." The front door bulged, its wood flexing like muscle. The knob twisted on its own, then sank into the frame, vanishing. Anne screamed, clutching Paul's chest. "There's no way out." Paul slammed his fists against the wall, skin tearing, blood smearing red across the pale plaster. The wall drank it in. The stains spread, pulsing faintly like veins. "Feed us." "Yes. More." The air grew stifling. Hot one moment, cold the next. Their breath steamed, then burned. The temperature swung wildly, punishing them for every beat of fear, every drop of anger. The chandelier above reignited with a sudden blaze, light searing, before snuffing itself into ash. Darkness devoured the room, and in that darkness the whispers converged into one voice. Low, resonant, the voice of the house itself. "Don't be afraid. You'll never be alone again." The floor rippled beneath their feet, rising like waves. Boards buckled, forcing them toward the center of the room. Paul dragged Anne toward the staircase, but the steps collapsed inward, yawning open into blackness. From the pit rose a draft, cold, wet, foul. Whispers swirled up with it, hissing like laughter. "Down, down where the others wait. Anne clutched Paul's arm, nails digging into his skin. Others? The walls shuddered, amused. Yes, we keep them all. You'll see. Anne shook her head violently. No, we're not yours. The house's voice deepened, rattling the beams. You moved in. You gave us your anger, your fear. You fed us. You are ours. The ceiling bowed lower, forcing them to crouch. Plaster rained down, choking their cries. Paul pressed his forehead against Anne's, whispering desperately, "Close your eyes. Don't listen. Maybe if we don't give it what it wants." But the house roared with laughter. We already have it. Every word, every breath, every thought. The walls flushed red, glowing as if with blood. Heat surged, blistering. Anne shrieked as her palm burned against the floorboards, leaving a handprint scorched into the wood. Paul pulled her up, staggering. We fight until the end. The whispers swelled, exultant. Yes, fight, rage, more, more. The walls expanded outward, then slammed inward violently. They fell to their knees, coughing in dust and heat. And then, everything went still. The silence was worse than the noise. Paul and Anne sat frozen, clutching each other, waiting for the next strike. But the house simply breathed. The walls expanded, contracted, slow, gentle, like lungs. And then the voice returned, soft, almost tender. Don't worry, you'll never feel alone again. Anne's tears spilled freely. Her lips trembled. Paul, but his reply was drowned by the sound of the walls closing. The foyer collapsed inward, floor and ceiling meeting like jaws. The last thing Anne saw was Paul's face, his eyes wide with defiance and despair. The house swallowed them whole. The whispers fell silent. By morning, the hill was quiet. From the town below, the house looked the same as ever, tall, solemn, lonely against the skyline. But if anyone walked near, they might notice something strange. The windows seemed warmer, almost fogged from the inside. And if one pressed their ear against the stone, just for a moment, they might hear faint voices arguing, or crying, or laughing. That night, a light burned in the upstairs window. No one had lit it, and from within the walls, the house whispered to itself, satisfied. Never alone, never alone, never alone. The hill exhaled, carrying the sound into the valley below, and the townspeople who passed by shivered, hurrying their steps, muttering the same warning they always had. No one stays in the house on the hill. Not for long. You've heard them all now. The whispers from the walls, the child at the window, the voice inside the glass, the hill that keeps its secrets. 7 stories, 7 hours lost to the dark. And yet, maybe not lost at all. Maybe the night was always meant to claim them. The signal you've been listening to will fade. It always does. But remember, this silence isn't empty. Not here. Not in your room. Not in the house you thought was yours. The static may stop. The voice may end. But the stories, they linger. And if, tomorrow night, you hear a faint hum at the edge of your hearing, don't be surprised. It only means you've tuned in again. And we've been waiting,